No, you have not.
So I've decided, similar to my support guide, that I'm going to compile all my 8 tank guides into one, with some significant additions to some of my older guides. Keep in mind that some, if not most, of the hero stats have changed, but this shouldn't change the quality of the advice, especially considering the extra edits and additions. Here are the timestamps for each guide on the screen if you want to skip ahead now. Also keep in mind that 6 out of my 8 tank guides have used the TTS bot voice, but I've recently switched to using my own voice, so apologies for something that I just can't change now. But before I start, there's 2 main things I want to address. Firstly, as you can tell by the intro, Spilo has unfortunately left competitive Overwatch. He's left shit cold due to the inefficiency of the work, which stemmed from him, unfortunately, having his Overwatch League coach trial denied because he couldn't be there for 2 days out of the 11 or so that the trials lasted, which is pretty irrational and ridiculous, especially if this AL team are at the bottom of the league. I made this phone wallpaper out of appreciation for the sheer work, time and effort he embraced in his coaching, and I think that without a shadow of a doubt, he is and will always be a staple of the Overwatch competitive community. He still currently streams to make up for the sub-requested VODs that have piled up over the weeks, and to interact with some of his stream-specific channels in his Discord. I highly recommend you check out his stream. The link is in the top line of the description, and will be a pinned comment down below. The second thing I want to address is that I've been booted off my team Dystopia. Some of you might already know the team, as I've mentioned in the intros of my previous videos. The reason why I was kicked was because I showed no commitment, even though I have done the following. Firstly, I did VOD reviews consistently of scrims we lost on my Twitch. Secondly, I made a 1000 word Google document on Fast Dive, which I specifically made for my team, which is linked in the description of my Sombra guide. Thirdly, I made specific map-based strategies for my team to follow, which they flat out ignored. Fourthly, I made a YouTube community post about wanting to make team comp guides, which explicitly mentioned how my intentions for doing so stemmed from Dystopia. And lastly, I talked for multiple hours with the owner of Dystopia on the topic of improving the team, which he flat out ignored. And apparently, this has all been ignored because I joined another team, Silix, as a coach, and the owner of Dystopia thought I was going to permanently prioritize them over Dystopia, which was only going to happen in the coming months and not days if our internal issues, such as not listening to advice, was not fixed. Like I've said, I've joined Team Silix as a coach, and their mentality seems to be a lot better than Dystopia's. With all being said, however, it should go without saying that I do not condone anybody sending hate to anybody involved with Dystopia. I have a lot of respect to the players that did listen to my advice, and it's unfortunate that the team has taken a massive downward trend due to an extremely impulsive owner ignoring the systemic issues within the team. Anyways, without further ado, here's the full tank guide.
Hello, haters. Damn, y'all mad.
D.Va's primary weapon, the WSIO, makes D.Va shoot her twin short-range rotating cannons, dealing up to 22 damage per blast, a 40% movement penalty, coupled with a short fall-off range starting at 10 meters, and infinite ammo. With most primary weapons in the game, there isn't anything too complex about the cannons. You'll be wanting to use them primarily for poke damage, and to combine them with other abilities for the quickest time to kill. The only unique piece of advice is a spy check for Sombras with her cannons, due to them having a wide spread, being hit scan, and having infinite ammo. D.Va's first ability, the Boosty Boy, provides D.Va a 118% speed buff with a duration up to 2 seconds and a cooldown of 4 seconds. A small piece of tech to get started off with is that you can sneak in a double melee by meleeing at the start of the boosters and anywhere afterwards, which should also stop boosters. With usage, you want to utilize the knockback from your boosters to displace main tanks posturing your front line.
Now he's created a lot of space. Now he's pushed up here. You guys have to cut back a little bit. Your snipers don't have as much room, whereas if he's on the ground, your snipers can still use the shield and poke off the D.Va, and no problem. Now Genji gets to walk up a lot. Like, everyone gets to take a lot of space. And you guys lost control of the platform. He's been zapping everyone. Like, he's probably up to like 40% of his primal now, which, and if you boop him off, doesn't happen.
Secondly, you obviously want to obtain off angles on high grounds, but here's Spilo explaining why the pressure indirectly exerted from your boosters is the same as peeling for your Reinhardt without even using Matrix.
What would happen if you boosted right here and used your micro missiles, your primary fire, and started sandblasting the McCree and the Ana from above their head? There's the pressure. Do you see how obnoxious and scary that would be? So you're sandblasting the enemy team. So what is the enemy team going to do? They're either going to, one, ignore you, and somebody's going to die. Eventually, even if you don't kill them by yourself, you're putting a ton of damage to the backline. So your Ryan Fire Strikes and that gets a pick, or your Ash lands a Dynamite and gets a pick based off your damage, right? Either they ignore you and you get a butt ton of damage done and a butt ton of pressure, or what? They pressure you out. Now stop. When they pressure you out, the Ryans are trading right here, and they stop shooting your Ryan to shoot you. What does that mean for your Ryan? If the McCree stops shooting your Ryan and the Ana stops healing her Rein, and they turn to shoot you instead. What does that mean for your Rein? Now your Rein is under a lot less pressure. Hey, they have a Zarya, but their McCree is not helping. Their McCree is not shooting, and our McCree is. Their Ana is not healing, and our Ana is. So you basically make it a 5 versus like 4 or 5 versus 3 for a period of time. And the thing with D.Va is because you have so much HP and armor and you have boosters, you can booster in, put a lot of pressure, matrix yourself, and then fly out again. And you're totally fine. You've had a little bit of ult charge. That's okay. Your supports will get that ult charge. You took a ton of pressure off of your Rein, and you did it by not just standing there and shooting Rein shield. You have actually peeled for your Rein by not shooting shield or matrixing cooldowns at all. All you did was stand in an angle and shoot the enemy team.
Make her fire 18 missiles dealing a total of 126 damage with a cooldown of 8 seconds. This ability serves one purpose, which is to deal as much burst damage as possible, and here's that combo. Firstly, use the boosters to close the distance. Secondly, fire your cannons to add a bit of poke damage. Thirdly, fire your micro missiles when you're close to the target so that the projectiles hit in sync with the fusion cannons. Lastly, melee as soon as you land the 10 damage from your boosters. This should easily melt any squishy character in the game. One small thing up against Fire Barrage, Reaper Blossom or McCree High Noon is that whilst you defense matrix, also fire out your micro missiles to kill the threat as fast as possible. Other than that, there's nothing very special about this part of our kit. D.Va's third ability, 2-second Transcendence, makes D.Va activate a forward-facing targeted array to catch and eliminate projectiles out of the air. It lasts 2 seconds with a 10 meter range and a cooldown of 1 second. Again, there's no real tech with Matrix other than to boost, shoot, and Matrix towards a target who may have CC abilities such as McCree or Ana, so that they don't land free damage onto you. The first common use of Matrix is to use it selfishly when taking off angles, as mentioned prior with boosters, in order to apply more pressure for longer whilst taking less damage. The second common use of Matrix is to eat instances of projectile cleave damage, such as Fire Strike, Damage or Nade, to peel for your frontline. This actually leads me nicely onto how you can more easily eat these projectiles, especially Ana's Nade, as Spilo elaborates on here.
If you're D.Va here in the blue square, and D.Va in the yellow square, why does the D.Va in the yellow square actually do a better job eating cooldowns and matrixing damage for her Rein than the D.Va in the blue square? Yes, recently got it! You can see. Now they're in a choke anyway. If you're here or here, they're still in the choke. But when you're at an off angle, you can actually see what you want to eat. You can put the matrix directly on the Kree or junk. You can see the animation of the flashbang or the animation of the sleep or the animation of the nade better. You can see everything so much better when you're actually on an angle. So not only do you put more pressure, you can actually see when you need the matrix to peel for your Rein significantly better. And that goes not just for peeling for your Rein, that goes for peeling for your backline. You can see, oh no, here comes the Genji. He's trying to hide, right? Or here comes a Tracer. When you're at a different spot, it is easier to see because the enemy team is either trying to sneak up on them, right? Or it's just simply less visual clutter.
Thirdly, try and not panic Matrix when a teammate is out of position, as Mineral further explains here.
In terms of Matrix management, it's just very important, again, to read the enemy movement so you don't just panic Matrix. So in this situation, is your Reinhardt under immediate threat?
Not right now.
He still maintains a pretty safe distance, and also you still have a target bubble, so you have a lot of resources to save him, and he's not in immediate threat. Even now, he's under a lot of pressure, but you still have a bubble. But now you've bubbled and you've exhausted all of your matrix before they even did anything. Like the only one that really pressured was the break. Otherwise, they just kind of shot at you. And then now they have an opening to potentially just move all in if they wanted to. Especially since you guys called that they should have a graviton. So when you just exhaust all of your matrix here, either they just all in and kill you, or they just grab you and they kill you.
Lastly, an extremely important but simple concept in classical dive that's often not known is a stagger matrix after your Winston uses bubble, as showed by Spilo in this clip here.
Matrix briefly on entry, in other words, the first initial little burst of damage, you want to let your Winston use his bubble, zap, 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 and then full matrix after the bubble. Because here's the thing, the bubble is great protection. Use the bubble to recharge your matrix, and then once the bubble's down, you can keep going because you literally have 2 seconds of on vulnerability on the actual relevant damage, which is just Reaper. You want to stagger your defensive stuff. It's like using Immortality Field and then using Trance. You don't want to use both at the same time. You can't really matrix a bubble, and you really don't need to matrix your monkey during bubble very much, if your monkey's any good. So using both at the same time is an inefficient use of resources.
D.Va's ultimate, La Bombe, makes D.Va self-destruct her mech, dealing up to 1000 damage in a 20 meter radius with a 3-second fuse. In terms of tech and mechanics, there's 5 main types of D.Va Bomb that vary with how commonly they're used. The first is the angled bomb, which is boosting in the air at a 45-degree angle, then releasing the bomb when just over a quarter of your boosters have been used. This serves the purpose of zoning the area before engagement to provide map control and catching any squishies by surprise, with a common example being a Gibraltar attack on 3rd point. I also highly recommend this workshop code, which was in Karku's workshop for every hero video. Note that you can also skim your bombs across rooftops and angled surfaces, which decreases the amount of time the enemy have to react to the bomb and increase the likelihood that you catch a split off target.
And also, if you do bomb, you need like a little better placement, because this placement really isn't that good. Like, it lands in a corner, so it doesn't even split. You don't need kills, but you need to at least split someone, so if your team is pushing in, you can catch a target that is split up, or at least force out an ultimate. But the way you put it in the corner, it's very easy for all of them to just fall back to that corner and shield it off. Slide it off corners here, you can slide it off corners there, just be a little more tricky.
The second type is the nosedive bomb. Simply boost into the ground and immediately bomb, serving the purpose of bombing as quickly as possible but not spending your time using your boosters, whilst minimizing how far the bomb travels. The third type is the air bomb. Simply boost vertically or at a slight lateral angle and detonate your bomb when roughly half your boosters have been depleted. This serves the purpose of zoning as much ground as possible, especially on carts. The fourth type is the stationary bomb, which I don't think I need to explain how to do. This mainly serves the purpose of remeching. The last, niche type of bomb is the drop bomb. This is bombing at the edge of a high ground, then shuffling the bomb with your own hitbox off the edge, which should catch everybody within range and LOS of the bomb underneath the high ground. This is the most lethal bomb due to how unexpected it can be, and a great example of this would be on the airship on Watchpoint Gibraltar. An extremely important usage of D.Va Bomb is in anticipation of a counter engage. This would be bombing after the enemy's Sombra EMPs, or after the enemy's ZARYA uses grab, as it zones the enemy away from dealing follow-up damage if your bomb is placed correctly. With tips surrounding bomb, try and use all your cooldowns to force out enemy cooldowns prior to bombing. This should increase the lethality of your bomb, whilst also being efficient with your cooldowns, as they'll be refreshed with a new mech. With bomb timing, here's Spilo explaining a downside of bomb engaging early.
Chat, what's the bad thing about bombing this? They're in a devolved fight, they're up 2 or 3, like not just that you're wasting the bomb, the fight's already won. In fact, bombing here is worse than not bombing. No matrix. And why is that bad? It gives them a chance to clutch, exactly. This son of a gun right here is 93% on Death Blossom. If he has Death Blossom right now, your entire team is dead. You give the Reaper an opportunity to clutch. You have no idea how incredibly lucky you were there. Bomb engages are okay, but your team has to understand that there's no matrix and you can play around it.
As with any other offensive ultimate, such as Genji's Dragon Blade, you want to use it at engagements. This is because cooldowns are used, which means attention is drawn elsewhere from your bomb, therefore increasing the chance of your bomb getting value. Moving on to positioning and playstyle. D.Va is such a versatile character that the way you play depends upon team comp. However, there are some key concepts that should apply to any playstyle. The first is drawing and baiting aggression from the enemy team, as Mineral observes Troy Hoban doing against the Spark.
He's taken a lot of damage, but he gets the bubble, and then immediately when Troy sees it, he's moving forward. Because he moves forward, he's pulling the Discord, he's pulling the Lucio aggro, he's pulling the Zarya aggro, and this means that Violet has time to farm up his trance, can save super.
That's really good.
Yeah, exactly. And immediately, as soon as he sees this, he knows my job is done. Just by moving like this, I've done my job. They're gonna focus me. Just make sure I don't take any more damage, or more than necessary.
Secondly, here's Spilo explaining how timing your pressure and off angles with your boosters is vital.
The timing of the pressure has to be good. You have to be timing your pressure for when the enemy team is actually engaging. Because if you just stand here early, like as they're pushing, as they're like getting through choke, and you start shooting them, what are they going to do? They're not going to push through choke. They're just going to sit there and shoot you, make you fly away, and then they're going to push, and then you're going to be screwed, right? The Ana uses all your cooldowns on your Rein, and so you just go and kill the Ana for using all her cooldowns. Or, you know, the McCree is mispositioned and you threaten the McCree a lot. And McCree's like, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me. And everybody stops what they're doing to help the McCree, which means that your Rein is under no pressure at all, right? Or it could just simply be in the Rein versus Rein trade. You're shooting from an angle, putting a lot of heavy pressure in the back line or even the back of the Rein.
Building on this concept even further to a Grandmaster or Scrim environment, here's Mineral illustrating what calls to make to take or regain off angles and high grounds convincingly.
He sees you and he immediately says, give up top, give me bubble. So now he's gonna lose no HP, probably get a little bit of charge for his Zarya and completely push you away and just win this trade really, really hard and force you to boost out. You know, so again, resourcefulness. Not only asking for Discord, You know, do you have bubble? Okay, give it to me. I'm gonna push the D.Va. Okay, boom. You know, these mid-fight calls are super important to kind of fight for map control.
Thirdly, something every D.Va can do in any team comp is scouting at the start of every team fight to see where the enemy paths. Here's a mineral showing an instance of this on Lijiang Night Market.
You can scout. You can either fly up and look, or you can go towards the right side. You can see the spawn from there, and then you can call a little earlier for your team which way they're coming, whether they're coming top, whether they're coming main, whether they're coming right side, because then you guys can position yourselves accordingly and beat them to the corner.
Fourthly, here's Spilo explaining why D.Vas must prioritize Pharmacy.
What is unique about Pharmacy compared to other DPS in the game? Pharmacy is the epitome of an off-angle DPS, but she can off-angle from legitimately anywhere. Like, she can go behind you, she can go above you, she can go to your far right, your far left. Like, have you ever seen Overwatch League, like Volksky Industries' first attack? They'll send Pharmacy all the way around spawn choke and start shooting them from behind. The reason D.Vas prioritize on Pharmacy is because she's going to be the most lethal off-angle threat. She's going to be off-angling 24/7.
Lastly, moving on to frontline tank synergies. D.Va Hog. This duo provides some damage mitigation and coverage of the low ground and high ground. However, both these characters are prone to taking unnecessary damage, alongside Sigma occasionally being the better pick simply because he has more types of utility, blurring the lines between main tank and off tank. D.Va Zarya. This combo has extremely high utility, however there are no stuns, and it may be harder to gain value from bubble compared to other options. Point control and objective pressure may also be harder to keep or apply due to the lack of a main tank. However, you can pull off the Grav D.Va bomb combo in the majority of ranks successfully. D.Va REINHARDT. This is maximized for brawl and the ability to contest high grounds, hence this duo is especially powerful on maps such as Watchpoint Gibraltar. You also have the potential to peel for your glass cannon backline. D.Va Sigma. This is a more defensive version than D.Va Ryan, with less frontline resources in exchange for extreme damage denial and high ground contest, alongside the ability to peel for your supports. However, the biggest counter would either be a double shield comp or a coordinated brawl comp, as there's either too much cover or too little frontline capability respectively. D.Va ORISA. This duo was quite versatile, providing point pressure and high ground contest simultaneously. D.Va can also peel if needed, and whilst not common, pull bomb can be performed. However, this is a slightly outdated duo due to double shield and Orisa Hog, due to the numerous nerfs essentially forcing Orisa to play with 2 shields, or for her to play with the buffed Hog. D.Va Ball. As you have no shielding but high mobility, both tanks will be playing off angles or committing to a hard engage. This means a lack of point pressure, posturing, consistent cleave damage, and you may struggle to peel for your glass cannon type supports. D.Va Winston, best for last. This way you have some safety during your dive, alongside the versatility to posture and poke against both tanks better than Winston Ball, in case you want to play a slow dive with Ana Mercy, or a fast dive with Lucio Moira. Well, that's it for the guide.
Mission Control, we have a belligerent dumb here that won't cooperate.
Ball's primary fire, Machine Gun Kelly, makes him tear his quad automatic assault cannons apart with an RPM of 1500, alongside each shot dealing 5 damage and an ammo capacity of 80 rounds. Firstly, you can perform a reload animation cancel, as Zetal explains here.
Technically, you reload in crab mode after 0.95 seconds, but you can't shoot until the animation finishes at 2 seconds. In other words, if you want to maximize your damage per second, you can do one of the 2 things. 1. Melee, or 2. Quick grapple into fireball.
Secondly, similar to D.Va, you can use your quad cannons to spy check for Sombra whilst the enemy team is staging.
The Hunters also appear to be completely ready for the Sombra counterpick, as their composition is well suited to disrupt her. Wrecking Ball and Zarya both have lots of ammo for spraying and spy checking.
Thirdly, you should take the time to readjust your aim with melee when shooting a target in close range.
First, try and track as many shots as possible on the enemy, and when you're about to miss, hit him with a left hook. While this is happening, use the time locked in melee animation to adjust your aim.
Note that even if you're not in melee range, you should still take the extra half a second to readjust your aim instead of mashing down M1. Ball's first ability, Lucio's Beat on cooldown, provides a minimum of 100 temporary shields, granting 100 additional shields per enemy within the 8 meter radius. The shields last 7 seconds, with a total cooldown of 15 seconds. Firstly, you should preemptively use your shields when you are about to take CC, and vice versa, as Spilo further elaborates here.
Remember we talked about how, I think this is the last VOD we did of you and Eichenwald, whether you have to kind of read the situation and decide whether you need to pop your shields early with the anticipation of CC burst. Well, yeah, they're running Hog, but they're running Doomfist, who's dead, and Tracer. None of those are going to really burst you down instantaneously. I would not be afraid of waiting to pop adaptive shields when you need to. Because if anything, if Hog hooks you and pulls you in towards his team, you'll get better adaptive shield there, and they don't have the damage to be able to burst you down. This adaptive shield, completely unnecessary.
Secondly, keep in mind that your shields are blocked by barriers. Whilst this seems irrelevant, when the enemy team play counter dive, meaning that they dive second as soon as you dive. Your shields can be easily nullified by an unexpected Winston barrier, hence you should shield prior to this. Thirdly, keep in mind that you don't have to use adaptive shields every single time you engage with Pile Driver. Ball players often use adaptive shields when escaping shortly after using Pile Drive, which is a waste if you don't anticipate high amounts of burst damage. Ball's second ability, Batman's Grappling Hook, makes Ball launch a grappling claw, allowing him to anchor to an area and swing from it, gaining immense speed. When Ball has reached at least 15 meters per second whilst in grapple, he will enter a fireball mode, which deals 50 damage to any opponent who touches him, lasting 1.5 seconds. The maximum range for the claw is 23 meters, with a cooldown of 5 seconds. Also keep in mind that by using the grappling claw, you will automatically go into ball form, which has a base movement speed of 10 meters per second alongside covering your head hitbox. If you didn't know this already, you also go into third person, which means that you can scout whilst on cover, as Yeetle further explains here.
Spy checking is good as ball, but holding a position where you can deny Sombra's pathing and scout the enemy rotation and potentially disrupt it from that position is just better. Had he been hiding in the halls this fight, he could have seen this pathing sooner and booped the enemy Winston out of the safety of his bubble. But because he didn't do this, Shangdu is quickly losing map control.
Now, since I can't include every single possible piece of tech in this guide, I highly recommend you check out Roadrunner's 57-minute video on Ball. For now, I'll be including a mix of common, useful and advanced pieces of tech. Firstly, you can B-hop whilst in fireball mode, which is done by jumping every single time you hit the ground, helping you to maintain more of your momentum over time. Secondly, you can immediately stop your momentum by exiting your ball mode. This is used to prevent you from rolling off the edge of maps, or for you to land damage from your quad cannons ASAP. Thirdly, you can perform a double boop as the streamer Ball explains here.
To perform a double boop, start with a long grapple ahead of their position. Roll into them with fireball and boop them once. Tap S or down immediately to slow down enough to lose the fireball, and then press W or forward to ignite your fireball again.
Note that since the speed required to fireball is 15 meters per second, a friendly Lucio may mess up your timing, and you can perform more than 2 boops, but this is heavily dependent on map geometry and timing. Fourthly, learn the minimum distance needed for a quick fireball, as Yeetle further explains here.
Quick fireball, whether it be for speed or for damage, every baller has to get the basics right. Learn and master the timing and distance needed for fireball startup so that you can maximize your cooldown usage and end up with less awkward interactions where you're just smacking your ball against people.
Fifthly, you can perform a wall jump against slanted surfaces by jumping as soon as you come into contact with them. For the next tip, here's Yeetle explaining how to do a wall jump against flat surfaces.
1. Movement input towards the wall. 2. Release movement input as you're about to touch the wall. 3. Use the opposite movement input and jump. If you practice this enough, you can pull it off fairly consistently on walls you're familiar with.
For the 7th piece of tech, you can perform a Toronto kick. This is done by firstly rolling back, then jumping, then grappling above you to then gain enough height for a pile driver. You can also do all 3 of these steps at the same time to make it quicker. For the 8th piece of tech, you can also perform something similar to the Toronto kick, which some may call the pullback, but I call it the London leg. This is done by grappling into the wall with high speed, then flinging in the opposite direction as soon as you come into contact with the wall, then followed up with the pile driver. This is used in case you have an enemy between you and the wall, and you stall to pull off a high amount of burst damage up to 150. For the 9th piece of tech, here's Ball again explaining how to do a 180-degree rebound.
The 180 rebound tech is used to boop enemies without giving them a chance to react to your change in direction. It can be either used to boop them off the map or to boop them into your ultimate like so. To do this, step 1 is to grapple anywhere as long as it's not super high, unless you might start swinging. You want to be on the ground the entire time. Step 2 is to press W or forward into the wall. From here, there are 2 ways to do step 3. The first way is just before you hit the wall, you let go of W, then the moment you hit the wall, you need to 180 turn and press W again. Once you're moving again, you can detach the grapple just before you get fireball. The second way is just to press S or backwards when you hit the wall without the camera turn. This is good for people with low sensitivities or who play on console. Once again, detach when you're just about to fireball or else you'll spring right back. One of my favourite things to do is bait enemy Lucios or balls near the edge and just hold down my pile drive button. That means I can't get booped off the moment they boop me. Then immediately I'll 180 rebound them off a nearby wall and hit them with the Uno reverse card.
Know that you can rebound at any degree under 180 in case an enemy is not directly behind you. For the last piece of tech, here's Roadrunner going over the various nuances with a drop boop.
Literally just grapple, hit them before you hit the ground, and then afterwards you hit them again, and it's just easy. You can add a slam onto the end of this, going for a double boop slam, which would do 200 damage. Another weird combo would be to cancel your boop with a slam. So as soon as you hit your first one on the head, as you're still midair, you slam, bursting 150 damage. After a drop boop, you can add on another reset, just how you would a double boop, which would then be kind of a triple boop. You hit them twice with the drop boop and then the reset third time. To initiate a drop boop, you don't have to be super high up. You can get enough height to start it off a wall jump. So you can wall jump, drop boop. You can add a slam onto the end of this, still, for 200 damage.
Ball's third ability, the Slammy Boy, makes Ball slam into the ground, dealing up to 100 damage in an 8-meter radius, launching the enemy in a locked vertical stance for exactly half a second. As usual, starting off with tech. Firstly, you can perform a recovery pile driver by using pile driver in the direction you want to carry your momentum. This is used to gain the extra few meters of distance to get back onto high ground, or to quickly flick off a high ground and pile drive an enemy. Secondly, you can perform a slam skip by holding down your pile driver whilst jumping over a slight variation in height. Thirdly, knowing when to not use pile driver can be the difference between life and death, as Detail describes here.
When playing against this comp, very rarely should Ball engage with pile drivers out in the open, because it just makes him an easy hack and sleep. To prove my point, NYXL's Sombra had enough time to de-stealth and then land the hack because of how long he was in the air. With no cover to hide behind, this leads to his inevitable death. Ameng's entry death is the main reason this fight is lost. The proper way to engage against this would have been to set up deeper and then fireball through the back line.
Other than that, there's not much to pile driver other than comboing it with tech related to your grappling claw. Ball's ultimate, Area 51, makes Ball deploy a set of long-lasting proximity mines which deal 130 damage per mine, lasting 20 seconds. Also note that each mine has 50 HP. In terms of broad usage, here's Roadrunner going through the 3 main uses.
The best, and maybe even the only 3 ways to use Minefield, would be to split the team, the tanks from the supports, split them apart, Minefield slamming the backline so that they die, or just minefielding on a point so that they have to fight in the mines to stay contested.
As with any ultimate, it needs to be perfectly timed, as Spilo further explains here.
Perfectly timed. Good mines too. It doesn't need to get kills to be good. They're trying to go in and find value with this mine engage. They've committed to this fight. You go for like a boop play. You don't quite get it good enough. You preemptively adaptive shield, which is good because the ROADHOG, which is good. You mine, which is good. And then you get out of town. You've done your job. Like, there's somebody on point right now. That person is by themselves. They're so split right now, your team can follow up on all of this. Your Genji can follow up on all of this.
As with any other offensive ultimate, such as Dragon Blade, you want to use it at engagement. This is because cooldowns are used, which means attention is drawn elsewhere from your minefield, therefore increasing the chance of it getting value. Moving on to the penultimate section of this guide, diving, dueling, and disrupting. Here's Spilo explaining this breakdown of Ball's playstyle.
It's dive, duel, disrupt. You kind of break down the disrupt into like point pressure, boop, okay? Is it this? Is it this? Is it this? And obviously that's going to change depending on the status of your cooldowns as well. Like, you're less likely to be able to dive or duel if you're down your adaptive shields, right? In addition, a lot of your dives were mistimed. This was a consistent theme. And actually your boop pressure was mistimed as well. So whether it was Genji and Spawn, whether it was you diving onto their Sigma instead of their Ana before they even push through, whether it was you rolling through them before they are even through the choke, you're usually too early. Like, you want to be like, the fight has started now and you displace their positioning. The enemy tanks have committed to the fight, then you dive their Ana. And that screws them up because now they're already in a position to where they don't want to go and deal with what the heck's going on back there. They're looking this way. There's people shooting them in the face. And if you're going in first and they just shoot you and they clear you out and then they use their cooldowns in your team while you're going to get a mega health pack, that's a 5v6. And you fed ult charge. As well as, obviously don't go for your boop role plays if half of your team isn't even there or a member of your team isn't there to follow up on it. And if they're not in a position to get booped.
When playing Ball against compositions that have high damage and CC, such as McCree, Hog Mei, you want to live in the backline of the enemy due to the lack of peel. This means you live off mega health packs, and you can't let a little bit of CC disrupt you, as Spilo elaborates on here.
And I wouldn't take that as a situation for you to run away either. You get hooked, so what? Like, you go into the backline, you grab the mini, you get the mega underneath it, and then what are they gonna do? Your perfect rollout gets screwed up, and you panic and roll back to your team. But all it does is it doesn't make you any safer, it pulls attention away from your supports who are already under enough pressure as it is, and it means that for you to actually access the backline, it takes you even longer.
Keep in mind that if DPSs such as Mei, McCree, Sombra or Hog decide to play in the backline to counter this playstyle, you must time your engagements onto their backline for when your team pushes in. You drawing and tanking CC abilities from these heroes will give the rest of your team an advantage in the frontline matchup. Lastly, Moving on to frontline tank synergies as usual. Bull Ryan. This is dedicated towards distraction and a more passive playstyle, as your Ryan acknowledges that he will be alone on the front line. You can both go aggressive for when you dive in, as this will direct attention and focus elsewhere. However, in a straight up frontline versus frontline matchup, you will lose. Bull Orisa. This tank duo has the highest amount of individual sustainability in the game, alongside synergies such as Pull Slam or Pull Mines, which you have to capitalize on. The crowd control from either character can also deny a dive from a Winston, however your backline supports may be left unattended. Bull Zarya. This is arguably a better version than Winston Zarya, as it's often easier to get your Zarya charged when diving in aggressively. However, your Zarya should be playing passive, applying objective pressure, farming energy when you engage, and should play well within cover to bait the enemy team to overextend, just like the Hunters did once against the NYXL. Bull Sigma. This duo is essentially the upgraded version of Sigma Winston. Your knockback pairs well with Sigma, as he can easily punish anyone out of position, and since you'll be tanking most of the stuns, your Sigma can more easily get away with his Flux. You also have decent ult synergy with Mindfield Flux. Bull Diva. As you have no shielding but high mobility, both tanks will be playing off angles or committing to a hard engage. This means a lack of point pressure, posturing, consistent cleave damage, and Diva may struggle to peel for our glass cannon type supports. However, this comp is sometimes preferred to the typical Winston Diva dive, as you can punish greedy picks, as Spilo further explains on here.
Hammond Diva dive would be better at punishing greedy compositions. Remember we had the Hanzo Widow on a Zen. I would like Hammond a lot better there, because Hammond is better into snipers, because, well, especially in maps with open spaces, so that he could path quickly, and he can get onto your greedy backline like immediately. Bunker comps and really greedy sniper high damage compositions, Hammond's better, because he is able to take less damage in the staging than Winston is, and he punishes a lot harder than Winston does.
Bull Winston. This is the most aggressive dive due to Bull's pile driver burst alongside Winston's jump back melee burst. However, there is nothing to stop you from taking damage, and if the enemy team have many stuns alongside the ability to kite away from you on a wide map such as Junkertown, you will most likely feed. Bull Hog. This comp relies off individual sustainability and playing spread apart, hence why Bull comps will struggle to find value when playing up against Bull Hog. Couple this with decent high ground and low ground control, with plenty of stuns and car control, which adds to the disruption. However, isolating a single target will be this main comp's weakness, alongside a great lack of peel for any backline supports and or ranged DPS if they're not being pocketed. Well, that's it for the guide.
REINHARDT's primary fire, Roadie Rocket, is a massive rocket hammer that deals 75 damage in a 5-meter radius, which can also cleave multiple enemies at once. In general, you always want to be swinging by default, even if nobody's close to you, even if you're coming back from spawn. The main reason why is because there is no disadvantage to just holding down your swing button. You might randomly hit someone out of nowhere, and you slightly protect REINHARDT's hitbox. You can also extend the range of REINHARDT's swing by turning your camera in the same direction that REINHARDT swings. For example, if REINHARDT swings his hammer from right to left, you want to turn your camera in the same direction at the end of the animation. Lastly, REINHARDT's hammer has a bit of a knockback effect which will be helpful in lining up enemies hit by a shatter in order to land a fire strike cleaving multiple enemies. REINHARDT's first ability, the Barrier Boy, is a 1600 health point barrier that decreases your movement speed by 30% and regenerates at 200 shield per second after 2 seconds of not using the shield. Here's 7 vital tips to maximize shield management. Firstly, learn how to shield hop. This is done by jumping forward when you shield, which is useful to preserve shield resource. Secondly, make sure you don't waste shield before a team fight begins, especially if the opposing REINHARDT has shatter.
Look how low your shield's getting. Your shield's low. So your shield's 1100, you go for another fire strike, and you've been above 400 health the entire time. So now, in this fight, do they have shatter? Yes, they have hammer. And before the fight even began, you put your shield to 1100 HP.
Dude's frozen.
They've got hammer!
The third, more advanced tip is to weave in your shield throughout the brawl to block and avoid enemy CC stuns. Here's a clip from your Overwatch, commentating over how Mano from the NYXL manages to do this.
We see this again even when the enemy is completely isolated. There's a lot going on here. He sneaks in the hammer swing but blocks the nade, because it's more important to block that than to boneheadedly continue to swing. And look at this from Repel's point of view. Blocks nade, dodges sleep. Repel has nothing to do because the Rein mechanics were too strong.
The fourth tip is to be able to read the state of each team fight in real time to be able to know when to go aggressive and when to play more passive. Again, your Overwatch does a great commentary showing the resource exchange between his own team and the enemy team.
Here on this Volskaya clip, my shield's low, they're zoning me out, I'm antied, I have to regen my shield, but my Lucio gives me sound barrier, so I go aggressive, try to isolate the D.Va with the shatter. I'm not gonna get the kill and I'm getting low, so I peel back to shield the bomb to secure us there. I get nanoed, so I try to go aggressive again, and you can see this ebb and flow, right? I wanna isolate the healer, try to get a kill on the Lucio, the D.Va peels, recognizing I'm in a 2v1, it's time to shield before I die, and it's this moment to moment, testing your limits and then backing off when you realize it's too much for you to handle. That's all the difference.
If you're struggling to do this, make sure to always watch the kill feed, and either track enemy ultimates or enemy cooldowns to know when you can play aggressively. The fifth tip is to utilize the angle of your shield, as Jayne goes to further explain in this clip.
You don't have to go in first like this. One of the things that you can do is if you're trying to shield from here, but you want to protect an ally while they're going into that room, use the angle of your shield to guide them into it.
The sixth tip, which builds off the last tip, is that you can block Transcendence and Sound Barrier by angling your shield between the enemy team. The seventh tip is that you can block an infinite burst of damage such as D.Va Bomb even if your shield is extremely low. This is simply done by shielding as soon as the burst damage occurs. More situational cases would be hard shielding whenever your ROADHOG, Moira or McCree use their ultimates to put your shield down when you think Sombra is about to emp. And to attempt to win the mind games against McCree's flashbang, you can flick your shield upwards to block his stun. However, he may flash you towards your center of mass when you are doing this. Another important thing to be wary of is that there is a slight third-person delay when bringing up your shield. You can see this on your screen where I go into the third-person animation but the shield isn't there. Keep in mind that I was on 130 ping, which makes this effect much worse. However, it is still present even on normal ping. REINHARDT's second ability, Hellboy, is a flaming projectile that REINHARDT tosses in a straight line, piercing enemies, dealing 100 damage. It also has a cast time of 0.48 seconds and a recovery time of 0.64 seconds, which I will mention later. As this ability has a slow movement speed, you'll most likely be using this to gain ult charge and not perform any skill shots. Here's some basic REINHARDT tech for Fire Strike. Abuse the 0.48 seconds of cast time and cover, then peek your head up to land your Fire Strike. Secondly, swing your hammer, then perform an animation cancelled by using Fire Strike immediately afterwards, dealing more damage in a shorter period of time. Lastly, you can perform a back Fire Strike by fire striking in the opposite direction that your shield is facing. There are also a few mind games, as Jayne states in this clip.
If I just see a Rein who is not fire striking at all, it's completely fucking obvious that they have hammer. So if the Zarya likes to use the projected bubble to farm energy, what you can do is actually fire strike above the REINHARDT's head to bait a bubble without giving the Zarya energy and without feeding the support's ultimate charge. There, big brain.
REINHARDT's third ability, Kamikaze, makes REINHARDT charge in a straight line for 50 meters, in which he can carry an enemy into a wall. If he pins an enemy into a wall, he deals 300 damage, whereas if he bumps someone during his pin, it will deal 50 damage. The pin is quite straightforward in terms of usage. If a REINHARDT pins towards you, use your pin to knock each other into the ground. Similarly, you can do this same trick against a Brigite Bash or a Doomfist Rocket Punch. The more advanced part of using pin is the part which will dictate whether you make a play or you feed completely. In essence, there are two main things to take into consideration: the distance and angle of your pin.
So this is the charge that I made. Like I said, a short distance, and considering that my team were very close, I had the payload for cover, and the enemy team was kind of far away, it's a pretty safe charge. The enemy Rein, however, makes a charge like this. Immediately, you can see the difference in length. So they've broken the first rule about the distance of your charge. However, the other problem is that the enemy Rein hasn't considered the angle of the charge either, and now finds himself completely exposed to lots of source of damage from lots of angles.
Also important to note that you cannot perform a back pin, whereas you can perform a back fire strike or a back shatter, and you can extend the distance of your pin by jumping at the very end of the animation, as you can clearly see with the comparison on the screen to see how much farther you go by performing the little hop. REINHARDT's passive, Rock, makes all CC knockback effects lessened by 30%. So for instance, Lucio Boop will push you 30% less far. This does not apply with stuns. For example, you will still be affected by ORISA halt. There isn't much to this other than realizing that you can play against edges of a map more effectively, and that you can be more aggressive even against Brig Flail or Lucio Boop. REINHARDT's ultimate makes REINHARDT slam his hammer into the ground, in which takes 0.45 seconds to cast, travels a maximum distance of 20 meters, and will deal 50 damage to anyone hit by it. The general rule to follow up enemies in a shatter is to swing, then crouch, then fire strike, killing any squishy hero. You want to crouch before fire strike so that the hitbox manages to hit enemies on the ground, and you also want to abuse the slight knockback from your hammer to line enemies in a straight line for fire strike. You can also use pin a tank at the very end of shatter to build 20% ult charge for your next shatter. When talking about shatter, the two main things to focus upon would be learning how to land and block them. Before diving into the former out of the two, here's a few pieces of tech that you should keep in mind. Firstly, shatter can travel underneath the payload. Secondly, shatter has a small vertical height of 2 meters, meaning that you can shatter enemies on top of the payload. Thirdly, due to the cast time of 0.45 seconds, you can be stunned or hacked during this animation. Hence make sure you track cooldowns such as flashbang or hack. Fourthly, cooldown track both bubbles from ZARYA to avoid accidentally shattering into her bubble. Lastly, only jump before shatter to shatter past the shield. Otherwise, do not jump as this will provide a bigger window for the enemy REINHARDT to block shatter. Now, before talking about how to consistently land shatters, here's a clip from Grandmaster main tank streamer, Octatroth, talk about how to use shatter after the nerf in which the stun duration was decreased.
The best way to get value out of REINHARDT now is to literally hold REINHARDT. Not using REINHARDT ult is so much better than using REINHARDT ult. So if you hold REINHARDT ult, the enemy Rein has to play the game differently to then when you don't have REINHARDT ult because he knows he can't be punished for any mistakes. Or if you're talking about how to actually use REINHARDT ult now, just solo shatter someone. Solo shatter an off tank.
Keep in mind, this piece of advice is aimed towards players who are above master since there are so many mistakes to exploit with shatter in the lower ranks. Talking about how to land these bad boys depend on your playstyle and how fast you manage to charge shatter, as if you charge it quickly, the enemy team may not expect a shatter coming in quickly. Alternatively, you could be the sneaky REINHARDT and hide in a corner of the map, telling your team to fall back to then land a shatter on an unaware REINHARDT. A consistent way to land shatter is using it when the opposing REINHARDT uses Fire Strike. REINHARDT's Fire Strike animation can't be cancelled, hence you can abuse this. However, in the higher ranks, REINHARDTs typically won't use Fire Strike when they think you have shatter, hence alternatively, apply pressure via landing swing after swing. By applying high pressure, the REINHARDT will be more prone to buckle, and will either use pin or shatter, in which time you can block and land your own shatter as he shouldn't be expecting it straight after. A nano boost and grab can also be counterintuitive in the sense that most REINHARDTs will attempt to shatter against a nano boosted REINHARDT or, whilst they are in a grab in order to deny follow up, so make sure you keep a mental note of this in order to block the opposing shatter, whether it be hard shielding, or fake swinging in front of the opposing REINHARDT to bait shatter. Up against double shield comps, you want to be finding small gaps within the enemy shielding to land your shatter. This is typically a high risk high reward play and sometimes you'll land shatters straight into shields. However, by the process of putting your reaction times under stress, you'll become better at exploiting these gaps. As a starter tip, you'll often see little to no shielding as the enemy team plays passive around a corner to gain shield resource back. Hence you can jump around a corner and shatter multiple players, which is what I did in this clip. Despite this being a blind shatter, it will work more times than not in the higher ranks as better players will save shield resource when approaching around a corner. Another way to land shatter against double shield is to simply speed past their shields as they have longer cooldowns. Note that this is only possible if you are within a close distance, and their ORISA has just placed her shield down. With a quick addition, here's Spilo explaining how to land shatters most consistently in a ranked setting, through playing dirty.
Don't fight clean. No honor. A lot of these whole mind games with REINHARDT and Shatter, they do matter in pro play, but a lot of the times, the REINHARDT that has the better shatters is the one that just fights dirty. You use your team. You use your flashbang, you use your speed boost, you're gonna try and flank shatter. Another big one is just wait for one of their Zarya to off-angle with personal bubble and shatter her if she doesn't have personal bubble. Shatter the Genji on your backline. It just doesn't matter. Like the goal with shatter, especially right now, is you're not going to kill 6 with shatter. Shatter is kind of a weaker ultimate now, and even before, you just get a kill, right? Get a kill. Right now, just find a target and kill a target. So you're sitting up there, you're like, I'm gonna turn this corner and shatter this REINHARDT. Don't shatter the REINHARDT, shatter anybody else. And if you're gonna shatter the REINHARDT, ask for flashbang, ask for sleep dart. Wait for you to get grabbed and then counter grab with shatter, right? That's obviously inconsistent, but like you kind of want to be a little bit more strategically minded with your REINHARDT. Like you should unironically go into a game and be like, all right, I'm gonna try flank shatters this game, or I'm gonna try a flank shatter this game, or I'm gonna try and set up a flashbang shatter. Or what you can do as well is if he doesn't have shatter, you can say, Zarya, just bubble me. I'm going in hard. I'm literally going to go past that REINHARDT and shatter his backline. Ballsy, yes, but it can work. I want to emphasize the importance of don't always try and be like this guy that spends hours and hours doing the Reinhardt drills and big braining, and just don't worry about it. Like, I think really the two main tricks of the Reinhardt is fire strike animation shattering that everybody knows about but people forget about, and then tempo shatters. Like, in other words, surprise shatters. Basically, like when they're pushing the corner, you just immediately pop out and shatter. Like, nobody expects that to happen. Like, you'll notice a lot of the big shatters in like Overwatch League are like, whoa, I was not expecting a shatter there. And then you kind of sit there and you analyze and you go, okay, why weren't they expecting a shatter there? Just fight dirty. Fight dirty.
Aside from the nano boost and grab tip, other ways to block shatter is to bully the opposing Rein with hammer swings. Then pull up your shield as soon as you see the animation of Reinhardt pulling his hammer past his shoulder. You can also do quick 180-degree turn by feinting in the other direction, then quickly whipping around as you hear the voice line go off. The last tip is to shield hop backwards to prevent the enemy Reinhardt jump shattering past your shield. The next section of the guide is really about team composition as a whole. Reinhardt is a character whose success or failure strongly relies upon how many resources your team pours into you. For example, Nano Boost will benefit you more than Coalescence, with the trade-off being a lack of survivability for your armor. Shield Break is also a key factor in dictating how aggressive you can play as Reinhardt, although where you path as a team can also minimize the effect of going against a high Shield Break team. For instance, if the enemy team are spamming down the main choke in Temple of Anubis second point, you can either go left or right to abuse the natural cover to save shield. The penultimate part of this guide is positioning yourself with Reinhardt. I'm going to keep this short, but basically, stick to corners as much as you can, don't open too wide of an angle to get a cleave fire strike, and make sure your backline has line of sight onto you even when you turn around a corner. Those who are familiar with my Zenyatta guide will have watched the clip of Jayne describing this, where you ideally want to path in a direction to where your Zen has line of sight to both front lines. Another minor positioning tip would be to position yourself to where you can keep your options open depending on what the enemy team do.
You hold this space so aggressively, you completely give up this space for free, and the opponent can just move in through a pretty difficult choke to deal with. So a much better position for you to actually stay is going to be right here behind the truck. There's a couple different reasons for this, but the first being that you are going to be able to equally threaten both sides. If anybody tries to walk through, you can kind of move in, fight them, and then go back to recover. It's much safer.
The last addition to this guide is making sure you check your backline are ready to rotate to peel for you and aren't being pressured, as Spilo elaborates on here.
You see the problem? This is extremely important. You weren't aware, exactly. And it's not so much as like, oh, I couldn't hear, or I'm not very good at I'm not good at awareness. Awareness in Overwatch is a skill that needs to be trained like anything else. But a good way to train it is to know what you're looking for. When you see that there's a Genji in the enemy composition, you know what he's going to do. He might not always go backline, but that's always a threat. So if you see Genji double jumping up here, do you need to check your backline? If you see the Genji double jumping up here, you don't need to check your backline because you see him. You know where he is. You know that your backline can just press W safely and help you out, right? But right now, he's on backline. You don't see him. You need to assume that he's doing something. This is concerning because there's nothing wrong with you pressing S, going to this corner. Now don't stand there and hold shield. Parallels, thinking of the fall. There's nothing wrong with just going to the corner and hiding, but there is a problem with you pushing.
Finally, the last bit of this guide, tank synergies Reinhardt and ORISA, high amount of cover, and in combination with a BAP, you can pull off the hold plus fire strike plus matrix combo, just like Toronto Defiant did against Atlanta Reign. Other than that, if you're playing in a position where you can't swing because you're too far away from the team fight, you might as well be playing Sigma. Reinhardt and Sigma, this tank duo has the most amount of mathematical shielding, although there is no direct synergy. A small tip would be to pin the opposing tank player when they are coming down from your Sigma's flux. Reinhardt and D.Va, this is maximized for brawl and the ability to contest high grounds, hence this duo is especially powerful on maps such as Watchpoint Gibraltar. D.Va also has the potential to peel for your glass cannon backline Reinhardt and ROADHOG. This is maximized for shield break alongside an aggressive playstyle, as ROADHOG is typically a selfish pick with a dedicated self-heal. You'll be receiving most of the heals on the front line allowing you to be more aggressive. Reinhardt and Wrecking Ball, this is dedicated towards distraction and a more passive playstyle as you acknowledge that you will be alone on the front line. You can go aggressive for when your hamster dives in as this will direct attention and focus elsewhere. However, in a straight up frontline versus frontline matchup, you will lose. Reinhardt and Winston, this has a slightly better synergy than the previous combo due to the Winston barrier being used to block important cooldowns such as nade, which can prevent you from being aggressive, although target priority may differ. Reinhardt and ZARYA, this is the most classic combo in which ZARYA can gain energy from you taking damage whilst you swing, and you can effectively cycle ultimates by swinging into ZARYA's Graviton Surge. The only weakness is a lack of off-angle coverage alongside close to no peel for your backline, in which you might want to consider your ZARYA swapping to a D.Va. Well, that's it for the guide.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Got some good news for you.
ORISA's primary fire, spam, makes ORISA shoot projectiles at 720 rounds a minute. dealing 11 damage per projectile. The gun has 150 ammo with a lengthy reload of over 2.5 seconds, also granting ORISA a 30% movement penalty. Whilst there's not much in terms of tech or aim technique, apart from you being able to cancel your reload with melee in case you accidentally reload, I want to focus on ORISA's movement and her target priority. Starting off with the latter, contrary to what the pinned ORISA subreddit guide states, you don't want to be focusing squishy targets. Your weapon is too unpredictable and hard to consistently aim with. Hence the only time squishes should be your priority is if they are static, which may be due to halt. Other than that, spam shields and tanks to gain ult charge and to decrease enemy team cover. Moving on to movement patterns. Here's Mineral explaining why it is vital to mirror the opposing ball movement.
No. You can see this ball coming at you, but you don't react. As soon as you see him rolling towards you, you are already mirroring his movement and moving around a corner. Because now you get slammed and you almost die. You get saved by the...
Immortality,
yeah. And this is what we talked about, right? Like, you don't want to get slammed because it exposes your hitbox and you might die.
Lastly, when you are being pressured to retreat, consider these factors as Jayne goes on to further explain here.
So you move 5.5 meters per second forward and 5 meters per second backwards. And on top of that, you've got your critical hitbox to worry about. And on top of that, if you're shooting, your movement speed is reduced. So you have to figure out whether you're doing a fighting retreat, so you're walking backwards while shooting, whether you are retreating and like fortifying, or do you turn around and get the full 5.5 meters per second so that you can reposition farther away faster.
ORISA's first ability, the Yoink, makes ORISA launch a graviton charge, pulling enemies to the center from a 7.5 meter radius. The movement speed both moving and pulling is 20 meters per second, with a 0.65 second snare and 8 second cooldown. Firstly, your hold cancels your reload animation if you run out of ammo, meaning that the reload can be up to 5 seconds long. Make sure you reload before you hold to prevent this, and to follow up on your holds. Secondly, you can hold to buy time. This is mainly used against REINHARDT comps to keep the distance to help break the shield. The extra time could be used for your damage dealers to load in an extra clip, or for your team to get the extra remaining points of ult charge. Thirdly, use it to pull enemies out of cover. This is most useful against targets without any cooldowns to help finish the kill. Fourthly, the most team-reliant use is to combo with your teammates' cooldowns. Most obviously, this is pull flux or pull accretion with Sigma, but you can also do pull bleed, pull fire strike, and much more. Fifthly, building on the last point, call out your pull to be able to combo efficiently. There is 3 components to this. Communicate your cooldown, location, and target of your halt, as you can see with the examples on your screen. For the 6th tip, try not to hold too high or too low.
You also don't want to pull too low, or they will get caught on the edge, or too high and they will have time to reach back on the edge while they are falling. I like to put it either directly horizontal or a little slightly lower in order to ensure the kill.
For the 7th tip, you can use ult defensively to punish mobile dive characters that have misused their cooldowns, as Mineral further elaborates here.
Very far for him to any cover. So he is really exposed here, which means you can easily, just like you do, step into the bubble here. Because you know, when he jumps in here, everyone is going to start shooting him. Naturally, the thing that he's going to do is going to try and hide. But if you step in and you pull him towards yourself, just so he's closer to you and further away from cover, that will potentially give you time to break the bubble and kill him. Imagine that he is here. Where could you pull to still secure the kill?
Maybe right here to the wall.
Exactly, right? Especially if you pull like over here, you should still be able to get him, and you're also pulling him in the air. Remember, he has no mobility skills, so not only are you pulling him further away from cover, you're also pulling him in the air, so there's going to be a bit of fall time.
For the final tip, learn when to halt vertically or laterally.
Synergize with an ally, halt them vertically. Big hitbox, halt them vertically. Small hitbox, need to land headshots, halt them into the ground. Anything else, punishing positioning, halt them laterally.
ORISA's second ability, Invincible, makes ORISA turn gold, reducing damage taken by 40%, lasting 4 seconds, and is on a 10-second cooldown. ORISA is also immune to crowd control and stun effects, and she can escape ZARYA's Grav and Sigma's Flux. There's not much to this other than to not waste it because of how powerful it is. Similar with Ina's Sleep Dart. In lower ranks, you can use Fortify in between shield cooldown. However, this shouldn't be done as you go higher up, as this can be the cue for the enemy team to use their abilities such as Flux to punish you. Other than that, save it to prevent or relay pressure from the enemy team, or to block a bunch of telegraph stuns around you. ORISA's third ability, Barrier Boy V2, makes ORISA fire a stationary barrier at 25 meters per second with 600 health, a 20-second duration, and 10-second cooldown. There are 3 key pillars with ORISA shield: angling, timing, and placement. Starting with the former, you want to be angling your shield to cover gaps where the enemy can have LOS to your teammates.
You don't care if there's a bit of an opening here, but there can absolutely not be an opening here. Because when the shield is breaking, if someone is falling back, even without the shield breaking, maybe someone sneaks in an arrow or a right click or something else, right? So this gap you don't want, right?
On to the most complex of the three, timing. StormCrowProductions explains in a 4.5k double shield mirror scrim to why you need to shield at the engagement, and not before.
Remove this archetype that Orisa just places shields off of cooldown and spams the enemy team. That's not how Orisa is played. I legitimately want you to think of Orisa's shield like Monkey Bubble. If you were Monkey right here, would you commit Bubble on this corner right here? No, why? Because the enemy team's gonna sit AFK, you're gonna break your bubble, and they're gonna push out and murder you. When the enemy team commits, or your team is ready to commit, then you throw shield. If you don't, then don't play shield. Is the enemy team committing? No. You have nothing but a little bit of irrelevant Sigma spam coming around this corner. You don't need a shield to deal with the Sigma. You're going to stand right here or right here. You're going to shoot the Sigma. Then as soon as the enemy team turns the corner and pushes into you, they're going to have to shield, otherwise the Wood is going to blow their heads off. And when they shield, you're also going to shield, and you can even push into them. You see that the enemy Orisa's places a shield that you can break without having to use your own shield, then just spam it, and then walk forward and place your own shield, and they have to back off.
There is a caveat to this, however. Pre-shielding before a fight begins is often viable, which is done by either shielding 10 seconds before the team fight starts, or shooting a shield in the air to then effectively shorten the cooldown. Moving on to the most common mistake with Orisa's shield placement. This is simply shielding so that you don't have the enemy team walk straight past it, especially against a brawl comp.
This is a very middle of the road shield because it's very easily circumvented. You know, as you can see already, people are walked around the side. This Reinhardt can just walk past it, and generally it's not achieving a tremendous amount.
Like we talked about the enemy team's composition, they're a very short range composition, so we would like to place a shield where we can still force point pressure maybe from right here, but to where there's more of a distance from the angles where the enemy team is going to be coming. You know, the Rein, like you said, doesn't just immediately walk through and start swinging on top of us, or that the ball doesn't just immediately pile drive us from the high ground up here, or the Doomfist doesn't just turn a corner and punch us immediately. The Reaper doesn't just turn a corner and walk through the shield and shoot us in the face. Like there is some sort of distance that's playing closer to how fast or slow that we want to play this fight. And like you said, they turn the corner, they throw down the shield, but the shield does almost absolutely nothing.
Building on this idea, if you can open the angle, you want to shield aggressively to punish a bad stabilization, as Jayne elaborate on here.
So you could have just achieved the same thing with this halt by walking 2 steps to the left and just spamming the Reinhardt. And that was a place to stabilize because you can open the angle. Basic cornering theory: person A is standing close to a corner, person B is standing away from a corner. Both people have an advantage, but they are different advantages. What are they? So A has the opportunity to open the angle. So if I was to draw this corner as the pivot point, we're talking about the distance between A and B. So they are now at a fixed distance from one another. If A moves in this direction at 5 meters per second or something like that, B would have to move inwards. It's, for example, like 10 meters per second to remain behind cover from the perspective of A. A can dictate the engagement. They can open or close the angle to engage or disengage on B at their leisure. That is A's advantage. B's advantage, being farther away from the corner, is that they have better crosshair placement, they see more of the opponent, and they see the opponent earlier if they try to open the angle.
Lastly, there are set shields which you can shoot in the air to make them land at a certain place. I recommend checking out this video in the description if you want to learn these set shields. Orisa's ult, Bongo, makes a 25-meter beam, providing a 50% damage boost to your entire team, lasting up to 15 seconds, with a physical health pool of 200. Firstly, the most basic but important tip is to bongo around a corner to provide you line of sight, but to also deny it to the enemy team. Secondly, you can use bongo early to charge your team's ultimates, which could win the fight in the long run.
If you had taken that fight earlier and moved up to the payload and died there, and then used your supercharger on the recontest, you would have had ult economy, your supercharger would have charged the ultimates of the rest of your team after you won that fight, and then moving into the third fight, you would have ult economy, you would have won that fight, and then on the fourth, things would have been even. So if you had, with your team, moved up forward, died there, and gotten a second fight, you would have gotten 2 more fights after that based on your actions. So instead of fighting 4 fights on Hollywood 3rd, you fought and lost 1.
Thirdly, use bongo to apply high pressure if the enemy team commit a push against a straight path. This is most useful against brawl comps in order to break shield before the brawl occurs. Fourthly, as Jayne explains here, you can use shield bongo by itself, especially with Orisa being less dependent upon her shield after the shield rework.
Nobody really needs a shield when you've got a team-wide nano boost. What I like to do is basically drop the supercharger way back, shield the supercharger, and then if I don't need to protect this, I'll just move forward. So my entire team, as long as they stay in range of the supercharger, every second that passes, they're just going to be straight up outvaluing the team. Your team doesn't really even need your shield to win a supercharger fight.
Lastly, you may want to immediately bongo after you place shield, as Mineral further explains here.
Bongos. No one can shoot your bongos except for the tanks. You still have 900 HP shield. Obviously, it's probably gonna go down after that, but it relieves a ton of pressure.
This is primarily for when you are down a player, and you need to win the fight quickly, as you won't win the battle of attrition. On to the penultimate section of the guide, positioning and rotations. Starting off with the latter, you can see Contenders Trials team incipients effectively rotate against goats to keep the distance on Hollywood first point. Moreover, Jayne goes to explain how and where to rotate against dive.
You on Orisa are right here. The dive tanks have moved up behind Lighthouse over here, and then we've got a McCree here, and we'll say like Farah's hanging around here. Do you rotate to 3, 1, or 4? You would go to 1. So you initially said 3 because you wanted to get out the pick on the McCree here. Is picking the McCree your primary win condition? No, it's not. What is your primary win condition when you're playing Orisa against dive? How do you win the game? You win the game by capping the point and getting to 100% first. What you're effectively playing is called anti-dive. It's not counter-dive, that's a version of playing dive. You're playing anti-dive. You want to make it as difficult for the opponent to execute a dive, which is their only win condition, and when they do execute it, you punish and kill them. And if they don't execute a dive, then you will slowly just cap the point and gain percentage until they are forced to either contest or lose the game. So why do we move to 1? Make it as hard as possible for them to dive and make sure that we're not losing resources. Because if they're able to bleed us from resources while we can't fight back, then they're going to be dive, and with all us at full health and with them not having to have had used any cooldowns to actually posture, then we're going to die. Now, what about this McCree presents an opportunity to you? So who's going to win? A McCree with an Orisa shield or a McCree? A McCree with an Orisa shield. So why do you need to care about the McCree? And if you do care about the McCree, is the Lucio on the opposing team sitting with the McCree? He's with the tanks. So just run him over like a truck. You either make him useless or you speed onto him.
Lastly, considering your general position, you want to play corners and have enough space to kite away and poke down brawl or dive comps before they can use their cooldowns on top of you. As usual, ending off with frontline tank synergies. Orisa D.Va. This duo is quite versatile, providing point pressure and high ground contests simultaneously. D.Va can also peel if needed, and whilst not common, pull bomb can be performed. However, this is simply an outdated combo due to Sigma Orisa, even if these experimental changes go through. Orisa REINHARDT, high amount of cover, and in combination with a BAP, you can pull off the Halt plus Firestrike plus Matrix combo. However, Shatter is simply too weak and inconsistent, alongside having no poke damage, and the inability to swing or cover ground on wide maps. Orisa Hog, this duo is the most outdated in the game, as Sigma just has more defensive utility than Hog. However, pull hook can still be performed, with whole Hog being a great answer to Nano Blade. The damage is highly present. However, if Hog isn't hitting hooks, he may as well be picking Sigma. Orisa Winston. Whilst Jump Pack Halt is some synergy, there are much more efficient combos, alongside Winston's inability to dive the backline without feeding due to Orisa's static nature. Soft flanks and soft engages are by far your Winston's best bet, but Sigma may be better in poke. Orisa Ball. This tank duo has the highest amount of individual sustainability in the game, alongside synergy such as pull slam or pull mines. The crowd control from either character can also deny a dive from the Winston. However, friendly supports may be left unattended. Orisa ZARYA. This is quite a weak duo as both characters have different play styles, with Orisa being defensive, and ZARYA being aggressive. Hence it may be hard for ZARYA to gain and retain energy. However, due to Orisa's point presence, ZARYA can take off angles to anyone contesting you, on top of how powerful both your ultimates are. Orisa Sigma. Best for last. At the highest level, Orisa Sigma is played with the cooldown management of dive, the corner and positioning of brawl with the versatility and range damage of poke. Use your barrier at engagement, and don't be afraid to be aggressive with your shield. Well, that's it for the guide.
Professionals have standards. Be polite. Be efficient. Have a plan to kill everyone you meet.
Sigma's primary fire. Ligma Balls. Makes Sigma fire 2 charges dealing 55 direct damage each, wielding a projectile speed of 50 meters per second, with a maximum range of 22 meters before implosion. There are 3 main pieces of tech to make your usage more efficient. Firstly, you can cancel your primary fire animation by using any of your abilities, including your melee. This may be useful to quickly half a tracer's health in close range, or to perform a quick 155 damage burst, which is done by using your arc first, then using your primary fire, then immediately using melee after. Secondly, the typical one-shot combo for 200 health point characters is to arc, then primary fire, then melee, dealing a total of 210 damage. Thirdly, there is a little bit of knockback with Sigma's primary fire. You can abuse this by using the knockback to elevate you to certain high grounds, as seen in Hanamura first point defense. For the 4th tip, you can utilize the slight knockback from Sigma's primary fire to gain kill credit for your teammates booping an enemy off the map, and to land your follow-up shots easier on more mobile targets, as they will be pulled towards the center of your primary fire slightly. In terms of general usage, you don't do much DPS as Sigma, however he is one of the best characters in the game for dueling enemies. In order to take advantage of this, abuse off angles in double shield to put stress on healers, rather than shooting at the opposing ORISA shield. I'll cover this concept later on, and why you want to be using Sigma as more of an off-tank rather than a main tank. You also generally want to be aiming at the feet of your enemies to allow the orbs to bounce past shields, and to give it 2 opportunities to hit your enemies.
Aim at the feet of the enemy. Imagine that you want to shoot them in the toe. If you miss their toe, then there's also a chance that they'll get hit by the orb when it bounces up off the ground. Hopefully you get what I'm saying. The idea is that you have 2 opportunities to actually land your primary fire. Once as the orb is going down towards the ground, and then again when it bounces back up off the ground.
Sigma's first ability, Super's Forehead, is a floating barrier in which Sigma deploys in a straight line, with the ability to retrieve the barrier at any time. The shield has 900 health, regenerates at 120 shield per second after being down for 2 seconds, and has a cooldown of 1 second after being recalled. Here's 10 tips which interweave tech and the usage of Sigma's shield. Firstly, make sure to shield when using your ultimate to prevent any incoming damage, or from you being stunned out of your flux. Secondly, angle your shield to block Transcendence.
Against Zen, use Experimental Barrier to cut off Transcendence healing by blocking its line of sight. Super simple, but super effective.
Thirdly, use your shield to block off healing from the opposing supports in order to force them to reposition. Force out cooldowns such as Healing Orb, and to allow your tanks to push aggressively. This works best against Stunners Zen, as they have no mobility. Fourthly, learn how to shield dance against mobile dive heroes. In order to do this successfully, just set your shield at a horizontal angle, then weave on either side of the shield. For the 5th tip, as Sigma is one of Pharah Mercy's strongest counters, you can shield against her barrage, essentially using barrage against herself. For the 6th tip, you can cancel your barrier whilst using your arc, or grasp. This will be particularly useful with the latter ability, as you can efficiently rotate each cooldown in time. For the 7th tip, keep your shield to block important resources such as Unanade, or in this case, REINHARDT's Shatter, as shown yet again by Octatroff in the same game. For the 8th tip, when playing Sigma as a main tank, make sure to only use your shield when the enemy comes into range, and to not block irrelevant spam damage.
450 HP, kind of throw it out, but there's nothing really going on here, right? Actually, there's no one even remotely behind you. Your 450 shield goes to 0. Now they're actually in range to hit someone. That's why your shield is breaking, because you're playing it a little bit like a Reinhardt would play. Even though you are now the main tank and you will have to do the primary guarding job, you have to be a little bit more mindful.
For the 9th tip, try not to play close up to your shield, as you may be playing too close to the enemy, hence you can be punished by a Mei, and it's possible that you may not block any incoming damage hitting teammates.
You're doing the thing again where you actually way too close to your own shield. Throw your shield out back here, you're still within effective range and you're still closer to running away. You're even running in front of your own shield.
Other than that, basic shield management from the REINHARDT guide also applies here as well. Sigma's 2nd ability, the Suck, makes Sigma absorb incoming damage to convert them into shields for 2 seconds. There is a maximum range of 3 meters, and 60% of damage absorbed is converted into temporary shields, decaying at 7 shields per second, alongside a lengthy cooldown of 10 seconds. Firstly, kinetic grasp can be cancelled by using accretion. However, as the shields are gained at the end of the duration, no shields will be gained if grasp is cancelled early. Secondly, if your reaction times are quick enough, you can absorb certain projectile ultimates, such as Grav or Blizzard. In order to help you do this, Zaryas will often bubble forward on high charge to grab aggressively, and Meis will also do similar telegraphed movement. Thirdly, your kinetic grasp cannot be cancelled other than using accretion, meaning that if the opposing Sigma is using his grasp aggressively, rocking him is your priority. Conversely, waiting for the opposing Sigma to waste his rock will allow you to more safely use your kinetic grasp. Fourthly, Do not panic grasp in response to taking damage from characters who used a beam, such as ZARYA, Sim, Mei, or Winston. This may seem obvious at first, but many players in Diamond and below fall victim to this. In order to minimize taking damage from these characters, utilizing your 22-meter maximum range will prevent these characters from coming close to you in the first place without putting themselves in danger. Other than that, you'll most likely be using kinetic grasp to absorb large amounts of burst damage in order to buy time for your shield to recharge, especially against Bab's Matrix, and against a double shield bunker comp, in which Sigma is a very strong solo Q counter too. Lastly, here's Spilo explaining the broad use of Sigma's grasp to sum up.
You want to use your shift as, oh, my shield is broken. I'm going to use this as like a defensive cooldown to buy myself some time to regenerate my shield and or so I don't get instantly blown up. Or number two, you want to preemptively shift knowing that a chunk of damage is coming in. So for example, if you were to turn this corner here, you could just shift without even shielding. And they'd have a big load of burst damage, right? You get to like 800 HP, and then you could just use your shield afterwards as you needed to. But that would give you a big 400 shield just for free. Now, that probably is not the best idea to do here because of Hog Hook. And obviously, you need to be careful of Sigma Rock as well. So you'd want to like shift and kind of play this corner. But it's something you could do. You could do it for a big burst of HP that you can use to play more aggressively. Because remember, you don't feed ult charge from Sigma shields. Or you could do it reactively.
Sigma's third ability, Rock V2. Makes Sigma fling a mass of debris towards an enemy, dealing 70 damage, and decreasing his movement speed by 75%. The projectile speed is 37.5 meters per second, taking 0.65 seconds to cast, alongside an area of effect of 2.5 meters, and will cast a stun of 0.8 seconds to any opponent who is directly hit by it. Sigma's Rock also has up to a 4 meter knockback if the ability lands directly onto an opponent, and in conjunction with the stun. Accretion is one of the most powerful stuns in the game. The cooldown is also a lengthy 10 seconds, likewise to his grasp. In terms of tech, there isn't anything I haven't mentioned prior to the Sigma's last two abilities and his primary fire, hence I'll quickly go over them again. Firstly, the cancelling Sigma's barrier with accretion, mainly used to save shield resource. Secondly, cancelling grasp with accretion. This is mainly used to quickly stun any ultimates, or utilize the 4 meter knockback. Lastly, cancelling Sigma's primary fire with accretion, only useful if the enemy is about to escape line of sight. Other than the two combos to kill a tracer or a normal 200 health point target, accretion is mainly used for its knockback and stun. For instance, use accretion to knock hit scan players off of high ground, which can either put them in a disadvantageous position, or force them to use their mobility cooldown, making them vulnerable to dive. Accretion can also be used to stun vital cooldowns and ultimates, which is best seen with Moira and ROADHOG, as you can save accretion to stun Breather, Whole Hog and Coalescence, alongside other ultimates such as McCree's High Noon, or Reaper's Blossom. However, similar to Sigma's primary fire, you can also use the knockback from accretion to elevate you to high ground, just like Octotroph did in the same game mentioned prior. This is much easier to do than using his primary fire, although I would still recommend you practicing this in custom games. Sigma's ultimate, the Slam Dunk. Makes Sigma lift enemies in a 7 meter radius, lifting them in the sky for 50 damage, then slamming them back down for 50% of the max health. Sigma's movement speed increases to 7.15 meters per second, with a total cast time of 1.6 seconds, and a duration of 2.6 seconds when lifting the enemy. There's quite a lot of min-maxing with Sigma's flux, with one piece of tech that nobody, and I mean truly nobody, knows. The tech is essentially going underneath your enemy whilst mid-air during your flux, to make them land on your head instead of the ground. This may not sound like much, but this is primarily meant to counter Bab's immortality field, as the vertical hitbox is simply not high enough. However, this can also prevent a well-timed ZARYA bubble, and an Ana using her nade when she hits the ground. There is also little counterplay, as even Octotroph was impressed when this was done against him.
Oh shit, I'm dead.
You landed on his head!
No, he did the tech. He actually did the 6 tech. I'm in this. I just got fucking farmed. No, he purposely did that.
Yeah, I know, but there's no reason for it because we didn't have a bat at the moment.
And there's nothing I could have done about it.
For reference, try and do this on defense, as you are much less likely to put yourself in an aggressive position, as the enemies are coming to you, rather than you going to them. Other than this almost unknown piece of tech, here's some general things to keep in mind about Flux. Firstly, use it as a repositioning tool.
One of the great uses of Flux is basically as a repositioning tool. As we spoke about earlier with the May Blizzard, it's a great way to position yourself out of the Blizzard. Same kind of principle here. If you Flux and then you actually try and maybe aggressively go onto this high ground, you can now basically contest the Genji, and you can contest them, and you can kind of make a very awkward situation for them, because it might not be very easy for them to deal with you.
The second is to abuse artificial cover from your shield or to hide behind natural cover.
Notice that after you Flux, your shield is here, and this is sort of sparse natural cover in this area. Instead, you kind of gravitate towards, well, basically the open ground. You can see here, if we look at this perspective, how actually exposed you are and how easy it would be for anyone to CC you out of your ultimate.
The third is to use Flux to kite away when running a double shield comp.
How do you kite as double shield? Well, Gravitic Flux is one of those methods. If you lift people, they can't move, they can't come any closer to you. It buys your team time, it buys them space. It may kill people, at the very least it forces out cooldowns and ultimates.
The fourth is to use Flux to counter nano.
Just by countering it, you will have made a huge play for your team. And it's actually not too difficult to do it to a Genji. All you really have to wait for is for him to use his first dash. It will take him at least a slash to kill someone.
The fifth tip is to be aware of cooldowns that can stun your Flux, or decrease the damage taken. These can be ROADHOG's Breather, Hook, Ana's Sleep Dart, or her Nade, and much more. You want to try and force out these important cooldowns before you Flux, which is done by pressuring the target heavily. Keep in mind that the tech mentioned prior about landing enemies on your HUD may counter some of these abilities if the enemy try and time them for as soon as they land, which includes Ana's Nade, and BAP's Immortality Field. The sixth tip is to force out defensive ultimates from the enemy team to open up space for your win condition.
Use Gravitic Flux to force defensive ults out of the enemy, so that they can't counter your other ultimates. A good time to implement this tip is if your team has a Nanoblade ready, but the enemy Lucio has beat to counter it. You can Gravitic Flux to force out the beat, then your Genji can go all in with the Nanoblade without having to worry about being countered.
The seventh tip is to simply get out of line of sight from the enemy snipers so that you don't die from a headshot. And the eighth and final tip is a little bit of target priority whilst you are in Flux, and to prevent tunnel visioning onto tanks rather than squishy targets.
You're a little bit over-focused on the enemy Orisa. So you see, in fact, your first thought itself is just to go on the Orisa, even though you've lifted a Mei and an Ana. Ana's actually only lives because of the bubble from her Zarya, which could have potentially have been broken had you and maybe someone else been targeting it.
The penultimate part of this guide is to do with positioning, which heavily relies upon your team comp. If you are running double shield with ORISA or REINHARDT, your job is to primarily play off angles to get damage and pass the shield. Utilizing high ground such as the gas station on Route 66 will help you find these angles.
You should be thinking about, can I contest their healers? Can I contest their Genji? Can I stop sources of damage that isn't just this Orisa? But right now you're very, very tunneled on fighting this Orisa.
Moving on to broader off-angle positioning. Rotate between fights and keep an eye on your flanks. Rialto first point defense is a great example of this, as Spilo further elaborates on here.
Hear that? What is that? It's a widow shot from a flank. Now you're going to have two options here. You're either going to retake and just stand here in the core, or you're going to actually go clear out the flank and start shooting them from the flank that you earned. Let's see which one we do. Still on the flank, still on the flank, still just shooting shield, shooting shield, shooting shield, shooting shield, shooting shield, shooting shield, nothing to shoot, wasting our time. Oh no! There's a hog behind us! Oh, isn't that too bad? Where did he come from? Walk here, zone the widow out, go high ground, and start shooting them from above. Or shoot them from behind. Probably above because it's a little bit safer, but clear them out from high ground. Then go down this way and start shooting them if they try and hide here. Or shoot the widow that comes from here. So many options here, and you choose the worst option.
Finally, to hammer this point in once and for all, mark long-range snipers as much as you can, especially on maps such as Havana.
Why do you shield the sniper? What about the sniper's positioning right now demands the Sigma's attention? Yes, deny the off angle and the high ground. Your job is not to just spam here, your job is to kill or remove these guys from the off angle. To constantly get the annoying gnat that's on the left or the right or on high ground to get them off. Sigma is the best off tank, arguably the best tank at denying off angles. Because not only do you have the ability to move your shield anywhere you want, you have range spam and you have regenerative tools. And you could basically, Sigma is arguably one of the best, if not the best, 1v1 hero in the game. You could throw a shield right now and spam these guys, and they not only do they not do anything, they have to leave. Like, I wouldn't just throw a shield here. I would be shooting here. I would ask for Orisa for a rock here. And if we get, and what does that do? They have to back off. So what does that mean that happens to this Sigma right here? Is he getting healing? Is this Widow getting any picks? Is this Junkrat getting anything? No. So what happens? His shield breaks, he has to back away. When he backs away, what you do is it's just a step-by-step process. Then you go and take you high ground. take high ground. You make sure that these guys are gone. And then if they're gone, well, then you could drop if you want to, and then keep putting pressure. But if you just sit here and double spam the Sigma, he could survive, no big problem. He could just shift it, he could play slow, but these guys are going to be murdering you on your backline. This is the angle. This is your job as Sigma.
Also keep in mind that if possible, you can also take their space and keep it, which is what Sigma excels at over every single off-tank, as Sigma has his own barrier and 2 forms of regenerative health. Other than that, don't play too close to your shield or in brawl range, especially up against Mei, but to instead abuse your 22 meter range on your primary fire. Basic principles such as natural cover from the REINHARDT guide still apply. Now onto the final section of this video, tank synergies. Sigma and REINHARDT. This tank duo has the most amount of mathematical shielding, although there is no direct synergy. A small tip would be to pin the opposing tank player when they are coming down from your Sigma's flux, and to shield at the start of your REINHARDT's pin. Sigma and ORISA. This duo provides a high level of versatile cover, with Sigma being able to utilize ORISA's hold by performing the hold plus accretion or hold plus flux combo. Use flux to kite away from danger in case you are being overrun by brawl or dive. Just a quick addition to the Sigma ORISA duo. Here's Spilo elaborating on when and why you should or shouldn't stack on your ORISA, and what you should do instead, linking back to the concept of timing your off-angle pressure with ORISA.
There's been a lot of bat break metas where ORISA Sigma would stack to push space, but if your ORISA Sigma are stacked, they're stacked because you guys are going in hard. If you're not going in hard, then you don't need to be stacked. The reason you stack is so that you could shield your ORISA so that she could press W into the middle of the enemy team without dying. Or she could stay for fortify a couple seconds longer. But you're not doing that right now. You're playing slow, you're playing passive. Your comp isn't really a pushing comp anyway. And you're stacking with your ORISA. And I know I'm talking a lot about the ORISA Sig matchup. This doesn't matter if you're playing Winston Sig. It doesn't matter if you're playing a Rein Sig. It doesn't matter if you're playing Diva Sig or Hog Sig or Zarya Sig. You want to get off of core whenever you can and put constant spam and pressure from here. Think about how much pressure you could be doing on the tanks from here. Think about how much pressure. Yes, you would get less damage if you were throwing volleys this way because they're smaller, squishier targets. But remember, you're not necessarily just going for damage. You're going for kill threat. If you hit a volley in this Zen, he's going to scream, help me, help me, help me. He either gets 2-shot or he backs away, gets Mercy Pocket, and leaves the tanks by themselves.
Sigma and Winston. Whilst this duo has no direct synergy in terms of ultimates and abilities, you have good coverage of the high and low ground. However, perhaps REINHARDT is a better pick than Sigma in order to be more aggressive whenever your Winston dives in on the backline. Sigma and ROADHOG. Similar to Winston, there is no direct synergy with Sigma, as you will be playing main tank. Try not to be overtly aggressive on the front line, as your ROADHOG should be the one contesting cart or point mainly.
And even though you're a main tank, it's not necessary that you have to be the closest person to the payload. It may sound counterintuitive, but there are characters here who are better suited to being nearer the payload than you, namely your Hog and your Brick.
Sigma and Wrecking Ball. This duo is essentially the upgraded version of Sigma Winston. Wrecking Ball's knockback pairs well with Sigma as he can easily punish anyone out of position. And since Wrecking Ball will be tanking most of the enemy stuns, you can use your flux aggressively. One tip is to combo your flux with Minefield to kill anyone who is caught in the flux. Sigma and ZARYA. This duo is best suited against bunker-style comps such as ORISA Hog, although do not run Sigma ZARYA against dive. While both characters can dish out a high level of damage, there is no defensive capability, with a limited amount of cover, no access to high ground, and few stuns. Sigma and Diva. This is a more defensive version than Sigma ZARYA, with less frontline resources in exchange for extreme damage denial and high ground contest, alongside the ability to peel for your supports. However, the biggest counter would either be a double shield comp or a coordinated brawl comp, as there is either too much cover, or too little frontline capability respectively. Well, that's it for the guide.
I just don't understand! But guess what? I do now!
Winston's primary fire, the Zappy Boy, makes Winston fire an 8-meter range Tesla cannon dealing 60 damage per second, with a 6-meter width, consuming 20 rounds per second with an ammo capacity of 100. Starting off interweaving tech and usage, against an armored opponent, you want to weave in your melee as the damage from your Tesla cannon is halved against armor, alongside making you more ammo efficient. Secondly, you'd actually be looking to use your Tesla cannon on cleaving multiple tanks more than focusing squishy targets in order to build primal as fast as possible. I advise against doing this in the higher ranks as you'll be able to control your primal better, alongside better positioning which is harder to punish. There are also too many stuns in the game for Winston to dive a squishy alone. Hence soft engaging by poking down tanks will open up opportunities for your damage dealers to land their shots and cooldowns. Thirdly, you want to utilize the 8-meter range by widening your field of view in order to be able to cleave multiple enemies. You have to actually be quite accurate in close range encounters due to how narrow Winston's Tesla cannon is. Winston's first ability, the Jumpy Boy, Makes Winston leap at an initial velocity of 30 meters per second, with a max travel range of up to 22 meters, dealing up to 50 damage when landing in a 5-meter radius, with a 6-second cooldown. I also want to quickly mention that the max damage may be 45 rather than 50 as in my testing. It's been very hard to pull off the max damage. Believe it or not, there's quite a lot of complexity in just a jump pack. Firstly, you can conserve your momentum by jumping when you land, making you perform a small skip, similar to Moira Fade. Secondly, your jump pack when activated has a slight bit of knockback which can occasionally grant you a kill. Thirdly, you can cancel your melee with your jump pack landing animation, dealing a total of up to 80 damage, although due to the severe fall off of Winston's jump pack, you will deal around 60 damage in most scenarios. Fourthly, there is a minimum takeoff angle as Jayne goes on to further explain here.
So no matter where you look below the minimum takeoff angle, you're going to take off at that minimum takeoff angle. And this is also what prevents you from like jumping through low doorways. Even if you look at the ground, you're still going to hit your head on the doorframe. And this is also why, for example, on like Nepal Shrine, there's the left, that's the inside by the Mega, and then there's the main and the right side. If you're playing, for example, a REINHARDT comp into a dive comp and the dive comp team is defending, you would attack left because the Winston can't dive your supports because you're inside through doorways.
Moving more onto the usage side of things, use your jump on slanted surfaces for a reduced cooldown as Jayne yet again further explains.
If I just jump on something, my cooldown's at 5 seconds. If you use slanted surfaces to surf, I arrived with my jump at 3 seconds cooldown, so I can be here for only 3 seconds before I have to jump out.
Secondly, learn when to control the trajectory of your jump by late and early inputs as CarQ goes to explain here.
The late input is if you input a direction after any of the 3 basic jumps from a neutral position. The early input is if you input a direction before any of the 3 jumps, so you're already kind of moving beforehand. Use the S key or down on the analog stick. Doing this on a late input pulls you back just a little bit, whereas doing this on an early input significantly reduces your overall distance.
Winston can jump as short as 7 meters, but as far as 25 to 30 meters. Hence mastering these jumps take time to accurately land the maximum amount of damage. Thirdly, you want to utilize the knockback from your jumps in order to block retreats for the enemy.
But if you know a target only has one route of retreat on Winston, instead of jumping in front of them, jump behind them, body block them so that they can't retreat as quickly.
Fourthly, there are 2 types of jumps you can do, a vertical one launching you in straight in the air, and a horizontal one also known as a short jump. Jayne explains here why the latter is more ideal than the former out of these 2.
So if you want to attack a McCree bot or something, you can jump vertically and then kind of like aim at them. But the other thing is that takes way too long and it makes you more susceptible to damage. Whereas if you just learn your short jumps, so how long you need to actually hold the S button, then that's more effective at controlling your distance.
Fifthly, you want to save your jump in order to escape engagements, using your normal walk to reach the enemy. This is because it can be very easy to burst a Winston down in before he gets the jump pack cooldown off. Hence dropping from high ground such as on Hollywood's second point defense, or sneakily hiding and flanking to your enemy will be much more effective in saving your cooldown to escape. However, lastly, there are exceptions to this rule. For example, if you have a guaranteed route of retreat such as dropping off high ground, such as on Numbany first point attack, it can be worth using your jump first as you can always drop off to point. Another exception would be setting up a crossfire. For example, when running Sombra Doom Winston Diva, your Diva can matrix you, with your Doom engaging from a different angle, and your Sombra scouting and shooting behind the target you are diving. For a short too long didn't watch, you want to primarily use your jump for mobility or damage. Mobility carries 2 subcategories, pursuit and escape, and damage can be enhanced by the jump melee animation cancel. Winston's second ability, Bubble V3. Makes Winston project the shield dome with a 5-meter radius, 700 health, lasting 9 seconds with a 13-second cooldown. Firstly, you can animation cancel placing your dome with your melee, meaning that you can combo this with the landing melee cancel. You can also cancel your reload by using the shield. However, the 1.7 second reload time still persists as you can see here, hence I'd avoid doing this. Secondly, and most importantly, you want to be using your shield to block cooldowns and not damage, as that is a job suited for REINHARDT and ORISA. You ideally want your shield to eat on a sleep dart, her nade, Briggs bash, Hog's hook, ORISA's hold, and much more, which can then make space for your DPS to freely frag on the enemy squishy targets. Thirdly, building on the last point, learn how to shield dance. This is simply done by weaving on the opposite side of your shield that your enemy is on. Fourthly, building on that idea even further, even though blocking the stun is your top priority, if the enemy you are diving has no stun, Try and bubble as late as possible.
If you drop your bubble on land and then the McCree is here and he chases outside, then you have to exit your bubble to finish him off. But if you land and chase but then bubble here, you can actually chase farther before the McCree kites you away, and then you could escape however you want.
Fifthly, similar to Zarya's bubble in between team fights, use your bubble aggressively to be able to poke down enemies within your range, but to not feed ult charge. The 13-second cooldown won't matter, as you should have your bubble back up before the start of the next team fight. For the penultimate tip, you can and should use your bubble in order to control as much map as possible.
This is really quite decent, because if the opponent wants to use this space, they're going to have to fight you for it. And if the opponent is going here and they're going to branch around either the right or the left side of this box here, if they do so without forcing you out, then you can get onto their backline without having to use jumps. So you can be there, you can drop your bubble as you place, and if they use cooldowns to try and peel for you, you can jump out safely. What happens if their diva comes up to fight you? What would allow you to hold your position? What is more important, this space or your bubble? That space is more important, and that bubble gives you a massive advantage. You can shut down the micros and the fusions of diva and force her to take a shit ton of damage if you shield dance correctly, and then she's going to have to retreat. And you've got this little gap here at the back where you can get healed by Ana. So you're going to be able to hold space better and control the map better. If she retreats, now suddenly you've got this space, your bubble's going to be coming off cooldowns, and they need to stabilize, and they can't do anything. And this effectively has given you control of this part of the map. Now, with you backing off here and your team not doing anything about the right side, instead of your team having control of this area of the map, you've got like here forward.
Lastly, you can block off healing with your bubble and your grav, as the shock do here.
Car, incredibly defensive play, but instant grab and a shredlock gonna force the trance, and the perfect bubble by Smurf, it cuts out the trance.
Winston's ultimate, Angry Boy, makes Winston embrace his animalistic nature, refreshing his health pool to 1000, dealing 40 damage per swing, with a 30% increase in movement speed, with massive 4-meter swings. Winston can also swing every 0.66 seconds, alongside Primal Rage lasting 10 seconds. Also note that Winston's jump pack cooldown goes from 6 seconds to 2 seconds, and that if you finish Primal with more than 400 health at the end of the duration, your normal health goes to 400. Starting off with 4 very important interactions. Firstly, your jump cooldown is refreshed when you use Primal, meaning you can travel as far as a Reinhardt pin in a fraction of the time. Secondly, your jump cooldown is also refreshed when exiting Primal, meaning you can make a quick escape as well, or pursue any stragglers. Thirdly, when considering the melee hitbox, you can often jump over the enemy. In order to remedy this, simply look down when smacking your enemy in order to place the enemy in your hitbox. Lastly, similar with extending Reinhardt's melee animation by turning in the same direction that your hammer swings, you want to turn your camera in the direction that Winston swings his fists to increase the size of the hitbox. Moving on to usage. Whilst this isn't a conceptually difficult piece of kit for Winston to grasp, the execution required to eliminate a single target requires many hours of practice to get it down consistently in each game. The main use of your Primal is to focus down one single target instead of booping every enemy you see. Here's KarQ going in depth about the Primal combo, which takes advantage of previous tech mentioned.
So, jump onto an enemy and use your Tesla cannon on them as soon as you get in range, and make sure to combo it with a melee when you land. This already does like 50 to 90 damage with the basic attack plus melee plus jump pack landing damage. Then transform to Primal Rage and use your first smack. You're then going to follow up with a low jump. Now you use your second smack in mid-air around halfway through your jump. Then you land from the jump pack in front of them. Then use your third smack.
Here he is again explaining how to do the triple melee combo, which is slightly easier than the prior combo.
1. Use the first smack, which does 40 damage. 2. Start your second smack first, then use your low jump after, so that it makes contact with the enemy near the end of the animation. This gives you enough time to start the third smack just as you land before they get booped too far from the second smack.
Building on this idea of focusing down a single target, you'll often want to juggle them in a corner. In order to do this, you want to continuously swing so that you constantly utilize the knockback from your fists, as well as swing in front of them so that you don't accidentally boop them out of the corner. Thirdly, you ideally want to use your jump off cooldown to get the extra damage. Fourthly, building on this idea, you want to short jump in front of them, as this is the least amount of distance you can travel, alongside taking a step back every time you jump, so you always land your short jump in front of your enemy. In terms of other ways to use Primal, creating space and directing healing resources away from the front line is certainly viable, especially against characters who need line of sight, such as Ana. However, this would require some coordination for your team as a whole to push up and kill the tanks while you displace the enemy backline. Primal can also be used to eat a ton of stuns whilst forcing about key abilities such as Bap's Lamp or Zen's Transcendence in order to make way for your actual win condition, such as making sure that your Nano Blade doesn't get countered by the enemy backline utility. Lastly, Primal can be used to stall for as long as possible in order to get ultimates up of your own, especially when considering you can wait until you are below 100 health, then using Primal to refresh all your cooldowns and gain 1000 health. One small things before moving on to the next section. I recommend using your bubble as deep as possible before you use Primal, as you can't use your bubble during Primal. This can offer some protection for not only you, but also your teammates who may be diving with you. You could also use your bubble on your supports, then take advantage of the jump cooldown refresh to get back in the fight quickly. Moving on to the penultimate section of playstyle and positioning. This mainly depends upon your team composition, unlike some other characters, as this will be determining whether your target priority, your win condition, and how fast you play. When running long range, high damage DPS characters such as Pharah, Hanzo, or Widowmaker, you want to be playing much slower, posturing around the tanks, as Jayne goes on to further elaborate here.
You're running Pharah and you're running Hanzo, so you can't proactively stage a dive or anything like that, but what you can do is you can prevent the opponent from diving on you, and then after that you can force mistakes or force the opponents to do something because you have higher damage as well. The tank simply can't exist in this contesting state for very long.
However, when running a dive DPS duo, you want to stage your dive, and with Sombra Doom, you want to set up a kill box where your cleave burst damage kills anyone in this area. I'll elaborate on this type of dive in the future. Moreover, here's Spilo explaining the 4 pillars when it comes to knowing when to hard engage in a soft or a slow dive comp.
You're saying like, okay, he doesn't ever go deep. Well, if his Sombra was set up and they had a cooldown advantage, they would go in deep, okay? So you really only go in heavy hard in this composition because this is like soft dive, right? Because you've got like a pokey hero, you know, a really, really hard backline to dive, and really only one hero that you can dive with. You don't really go hard backline unless you have one of 3 things, okay? A ultimate. You have a significant cooldown advantage, not just like, oh, they don't have, you know, and they're missing an armor pack, or there is significant positional advantage, okay? This is the only thing that you're gonna hard dive off of, all right? Or like a numbers advantage. Like, I guess we could say numbers as well, as like numbers or down 1 or whatever. If they had Nano, Fearless would dive backline. If Ana just chunked her nade, if D.Va just used boosters, and Winston just used bubble, you might see them hard dive backline, right? Because not being able to peel with D.Va, not being able to, their enemy monkey to trade your backline, and not having nade for the enemy Ana to heal herself means that you can actually dive backline and maybe kill them. Positional advantage, let's say the enemy team all rotates underneath and they don't even bother to clear you out up top. Like, let's say that see what these guys are doing? They're fighting Fearless. Why are they fighting Fearless? Because if they don't fight Fearless and they just stay with Badosin, Fearless is going to drop on Badosin and try and kill him along with the rest of his team. So they fight Fearless so that they're not at a positional disadvantage. They fight for this space because if you don't fight for this high ground, Monkey will drop on you. So there's your positional advantage. But they don't give Fearless that positional advantage because they're fighting for the high ground. So if the enemy team is in a really bad spot, you can dive. If they have no cooldowns, you can dive. If you have an ultimate, you can dive. Other than that, you play it patiently until you see an opportunity.
As usual, finishing off with backline synergy, Winston ZARYA. This is definitely an underrated combo, as Winston is guaranteed to take damage during a dive. Make sure to call for your ZARYA to push up when you create space to be able to retain it over time. Both of your weapons are also cleave beam damage, meaning that this is on paper a good duo against D.Va. Winston Sigma. Whilst this duo has no direct synergy in terms of ultimates and abilities, you have good coverage of the high and low ground. However, perhaps REINHART is a better pick than Sigma in order to be more aggressive whenever you dive in on the backline. Winston REINHART. This has a slightly better synergy than the previous combo due to the Winston barrier being used to block important cooldowns such as nade, which can prevent your REINHART from being aggressive. Although target priority and playstyle pace may differ, Winston ORISA. Whilst you can combo your jump pack with ORISA's hold, there are much more efficient combos. Alongside your inability to dive the backline without feeding due to ORISA's static nature, soft flanks and soft engages are by far your best bet. But if you are forced to poke down tanks, Sigma may be the better pick. Winston Hog. This is the worst duo for Winston due to the little synergy that both of them have. Ball Hog would be much better due to each tank being able to survive on their own, whereas you'd be constantly stuck in the poke phase as Winston, as you hardly have any frontline support. Winston Ball. This is the most aggressive dive due to Ball's pile driver burst alongside your jump pack melee burst. However, there is nothing to stop you from taking damage, and if the enemy team have menace stuns alongside the ability to kite on a wide map such as Junkertown, you will most likely feed Winston Diva, best for last. This way, you have some safety during your dive, alongside the versatility to posture and poke against both tanks better than Winston Ball in case you want to play a slow dive. That's it for the guide.
Oh boy! Nachos Bill Grande!
Hog's primary fire, the Scrappy Boy, makes Hog either shoot short-range blasts of shrapnel, or a shrapnel ball that detonates farther away. They both deal up to 150 damage per shot, with the rate of fire at 1 shot every 0.7 seconds, alongside an ammo capacity of 6, and a projectile speed of 80 meters per second. With Hog's secondary fire, in pre-detonation, the ball of shrapnel deals 50 damage, detonating at exactly 8 meters. The experimental changes will also increase the maximum damage dealt from 150 to 175 by increasing individual pellet damage, which I will talk about later on. Starting off with a bit of tech. Firstly, you can animation cancel your reload by half a second by using your breather as soon as the scrap is loaded into the gun. Secondly, you can cancel your reload in the same manner with Hog's hook, alongside his melee. Thirdly, you can end the recovery time after Hog fires his scrap gun by using either of his abilities, which we'll reference later on Hog's hook section of the guide. In terms of usage for Hog's scrap gun, there's not much either than to use your alternate fire to break shields. In fact, Hog on Live can break an ORISA shield in 4 shots if all his pellets land, and on Experimental, he can break the nerfed Sigma shield in 4 shots due to the increased damage on his scrap gun. For his primary fire, most Hogs often struggle dealing decent damage in close range, especially against mobile and armored targets. In this clip here, Gregor undershoots his shot against this Tracer, and in a desperate attempt to redeem the missed damage, his second shot is after the Tracer blinks, which will be punishing especially with the increased recovery time. Moreover, Gregor now overshoots his hook against the Tracer as she escapes through the doorway. In order to fix the dominoes effect of endless mistakes, a slightly higher sensitivity or the ability to confidently flick would prevent undershooting, which would then prevent overshooting if you miss your first shot. A quick point to correct here is that trigger discipline is often the issue, not sensitivity, as Spilo corrects on here.
I'd completely disagree with his analysis there. The main problem with a lot of Hogs, and this Reapers have the same error as well, but especially with Roadhog with a rated fire nerf, is they treat the character like it's a spam hero in close range, when really it's very selective. Like the Zens have this problem too in close range duels against Genji. You will win so many more duels as Zen versus Tracer and Genji if you actually chill out and click your individual shots instead of panicking. Same thing with Roadhog, except it's even more important because you only have 5 shots and your fire rate's lower. Like that Hog, if he took a 1/10 of a second longer or a 1/4 of a second longer to shoot his shots, he would have killed that Tracer. Chill out. Chill out. That's my biggest feedback for Hogs that are struggling in those duels is chill out. I guarantee it has nothing to do with the sense. It has everything to do with like how fast you're firing your shots.
Secondary fire is 8 meters.
You're not giving yourself time to actually aim. You're just like throwing him. Like the fact that he actually said that he fired his shot after the Tracer had already blinked is this isn't a
second shot is after the Tracer blinks.
You hear that? That's not a sensitivity issue.
Tracer, and in a desperate attempt to redeem the missed damage, his second
right there. That's not a sense problem. He didn't even move his camera. Right? That's a trigger discipline issue.
Lastly, as the detonation distance for Hog's secondary fire is 8 meters, the ideal one-shot distance for Hog with his alternate fire is 8.5 to 10 meters. Over time, you will become more comfortable with this distance, being capable of landing these satisfying one-shots without having to use hook. Hog's first ability, the hook, line and sinker, makes Hog throw a chain up to 20 meters, pulling any target caught towards him. It also deals 30 damage, with a projectile speed of 40 meters per second, and a cooldown of 8 seconds. Using the tech mentioned prior of eliminating Hog's recovery time when shooting, you can perform a one-shot dealing immense amounts of damage. Firstly, use your alternate fire. Secondly, walk forward to make sure that all your pellets from the follow-up shots land. Thirdly, throw and land your hook. Fourthly, keep walking forward despite the movement penalty. Fifthly, land your primary fire plus melee combo. This can deal upwards of 500 damage depending on how many pellets hit the head and body, especially if the experimental changes go through to live. However, this will most likely deal 250 to 300 damage due to fall off and missed pellets. The reason why you ideally want to walk forward is so that you are in range to land the melee, as well as increasing the probability that more of your pellets hit your target due to how quickly Hog's spread increases. Despite the experimental hog buffs, it is still important to keep in mind in order to reliably hit your one-shots on targets with slender hitboxes, or targets that are being healed, which nullifies the damage dealt by your hook. Moreover, an extremely important aspect overlooked by many guides is crosshair placement after hooking a target. As you can see here, Gregor hooks the Ashe without pre-firing, which is his first mistake. However, the more overlooked mistake is that his crosshair is not placed on Ashe's upper body, meaning that half the pellets don't hit, which makes the Ashe survive. You can also turn the camera when you've hooked an enemy to pull enemies off the map, as your Overwatch elaborates here.
Anytime you hook a target in, turn. There's about a 45-degree turn you're allowed to make to reposition the target, so utilize that to pull them closer to the team and farther away from their team. This is only going to amount to a meter or two of distance, but trust me, it does add up, and even if it doesn't come into effect every time, at the very least, you're turning your head hitbox away from the enemy team, making you harder to shoot, and eventually it will pan out for you. It's just a good habit to get into.
In terms of wider usage, Hook is primarily used to punish bad or unnecessarily aggressive positioning. Hence why Hog is so powerful in the lower ranks, as a lot of careless mistakes about where you position yourself in the teamfight occur. Often these mistakes entail a Bridget wasting Bash, a Moira wasting Fade, or a ZARYA pushing too far to gain energy from her bubble. Hook can also be used to threaten long, straight lines of sight, flanks, rooms, and sections of the map. I'll get onto this later on the positioning and playstyle section, where narrow and tight rooms on certain maps should give you a favorable matchup for playing on a flank to deny a Doom or a Tracer access to your backline. Hooks can also be used to disrupt ultimates such as Blossom or Barrage, which can be a major win condition for the enemy team, especially considering that if they nano boost these ultimates, you can deny the effect of 2 ultimates with a single cooldown. Lastly, make sure you have enough ammo to follow up on your hook. There's no point hooking a Tracer after she recalls just for you to have no ammo left. This is especially important after the patch notes where your ammo count is reverted from 5 to 6. Hence you have to be more aware of how much ammo you use, especially when performing the full hook combo, consuming twice the amount of ammo you'd normally consume by just hooking and shooting. Hog's second ability, 1 second Transcendence, makes Hog restore up to 300 health in 1 second, with 2 total seconds of animation. A 50% damage reduction is also applied within this time, and Hog's breather is on an 8-second cooldown. Firstly, aside from the reload animation cancel, Hog's breather applies the 50% damage reduction as soon as the ability is activated, and not during the 1 second duration. This means that in order to optimize the health gained after a mass amount of burst damage, you need to activate breather a few frames before you take that damage. A perfect example would be in Flux or when a diva uses her bomb. Secondly, if you take a bit of poke damage whilst posturing, don't be afraid to heal that damage up for additional ult charge, just as long as you have your breather before the teamfight starts. This is similar to an Orisa pre-shielding 10 seconds before the engagement, as she'll have her shield off cooldown by the time the engagement occurs. Thirdly, looking at the wider usage of Hog's breather, you'll mostly be using it defensively to prevent mass amounts of damage from cooldowns such as Diva's micro missiles, and to use it to escape tight situations after flanking. Fourthly, whilst less viable nowadays, you can use Hog's breather to face tank damage to save shield resource, or to divert resources away from your teammates into you, such as Zen's Discord or Ashe's Dynamite. Lastly, save your breather against team wiping ultimates such as Nano Bleed, Flux, or Grav in order to increase your survivability, alongside forcing out stuns that can interrupt your breather such as Briggs Bash or Ana's Sleep by utilizing your hook or scrap gun. Hog's ultimate, the Terminator, makes Hog lob an advanced mechanical device onto his scrap gun, cranking out a wide stream of shrapnel at 128 pellets a second. This decreases Hog's movement speed by 25%, with Hog dealing 7 damage per pellet. Whole Hog also takes 0.5 seconds to cast, with a 5.5 second duration. Starting off with tech. Firstly, you can cancel your hook with Whole Hog. This is most useful for scenarios where you miss the hook, and need to get immediate value from your Whole Hog as the enemy team is playing overtly aggressive. Secondly, you can cancel your breather with Whole Hog. This has a similar line of reasoning to the prior tip, but to also allow yourself to heal up an extra 200 or so health and not a full 300 to save you some time whilst adding a decent amount of survivability. Thirdly, you can cancel the scrap gun recovery time by using Whole Hog straight after, which is best utilized when hooking in a tank to deal as much damage as possible in the shortest amount of time. With usage, you can use Whole Hog against Nano Blade to utilize the knockback to prevent any slashes. This will also force his deflect and focus on you, which should be his lowest priority due to your health pool and individual sustain. As implied prior, you want to be using whole hog when the enemy team commits to the engagement aggressively. Examples can be against an aggressive sound barrier, an aggressive rally or coalescence, or an echo using her duplication. This will relay a great deal of pressure, which I will shortly refer to later on. You can also use it to deal mass amounts of damage, either to shields, or to juggle an enemy in a corner. Make sure that your team pushes aggressively to keep the advantage, and to not allow the enemy team to regain any shield resource. Additionally, you can displace enemies with whole hog to either make them easier to punish by placing them in bad positions, or to utilize the immense knockback to take an enemy out of their effective range. Lastly, keep in mind that whole hog refills your ammo capacity, meaning that you should unleash all your shots before using whole hog, using the scrap gun animation tip mentioned prior to get an extra free shot before using your ult. You can also use both your abilities prior to whole hog as they should come off cooldown by the time whole hog is finished. Onto the penultimate section of this guide, positioning and playstyle. Unlike characters such as Sigma, Hog isn't a character whose playstyle depends upon their team composition, as he is a two-dimensional character. One playstyle is to go for shield break, and the other is go for flanks and off angles. Speaking about the former, if the enemy team are running damage dealers that are heavily reliant on shields, such as McCree, Soldier or even Ashe, a viable playstyle is to go for shield break in order to punish the exposed squishy targets. However, if you or the enemy team are running a team comp that's not heavily reliant on shield break, such as Hack Fist, you may want to do the latter. This is simply rolling out on off angles and flanks in order to utilize your hook to threaten angles and parts of the map. Referring to good guy Griffo, he rolls out on the right side of Nepal's Sanctum with his team. Instead, due to his team's overall sustain, he should have rolled out on the opposite side to deny the Tracer an opportunity to dive his backline with the Ashe. And as you can see, even though the Tracer doesn't end up confirming any kills, she draws attention and healing resources away from the front line. If Griffo rolled out to the left, he could have punished the Tracer, relaying stress and gifting map control. Lastly, in reference to the anatomy of a team fight, here's Jayne explaining why Hog should primarily be performing soft resets in coordination with his team.
This is basically the spawn, and then you've exited the spawn, and this is a rollout, and then this is the posture phase. And in the posture phase, you're doing two things. You're positioning and you're poking. And then what transitions from the posture phase into the engagement is an opportunity. Now, this opportunity can be many things. This opportunity can be somebody being out of position and you recognizing that. It can be somebody using a cooldown and you recognizing that. It can be somebody using an ultimate. And these opportunities you want to create through your positioning and your poking, or during the posture phase. And this engage happens when you've killed everyone. And then winning happens. It is like the anatomy of a team fight. But then what happens is that once you've gotten into an engagement, but you are no longer at the point where you can kill people, you need to go back to posturing. And this is called a soft reset. If you go back to the posture phase, this is a soft. If you go back to the start, which means this either happens because of a team kill on you, not them, or where the opponent would have an advantage in a posture phase, you don't want a soft. You want a hard reset if the opponent would have the advantage here. But the way you were, and especially on characters like ROADHOG, these are characters that in the poking phase and the positioning phase, and this includes characters like Widowmaker and whatnot, can actually jump right to the killing and right to the winning. But a sustained engagement is not in your favor because you were 2 down. So in this circumstance, instead of like continuing to fight and try and fight at a disadvantage, you could reset while still applying pressure to the opponent during the posture phase, threaten with hooks, and potentially get DMAX or kills or whatnot with your hook. But you stayed fighting, you used your whole hog, and then you got killed. So not only did you stay engaged, but you wasted an ultimate, and now you're going to need a hard reset.
As usual, ending off with frontline synergies Hog Ball. This comp relies on individual sustainability and playing spread apart, hence why brawl comps will struggle to find value, alongside decent high ground and low ground control, with plenty of stuns and crowd control which adds to their disruption. However, isolating a single target will be this main comp's weakness. Hog Winston. This comp does not do much for Winston, as he has much less survivability compared to Ball. His primal may benefit you by booping enemies in bad positions that you can punish. However, he will be stuck posturing around tanks. Winston's shield also provides some cover, but with no damage mitigation or avoidance, a Reaper will easily pick apart both tanks. Hog Orisa. This duo is very outdated due to how brittle Orisa's shield is, and considering that her ult's radius may be getting nerfed, this will completely nullify the pull-hook combo. However, as long as your Orisa manages her defensive cooldowns well to apply objective pressure, you should feel free to flank and relay pressure off of her by taking these angles. Hog Reinhardt. This duo is very aggressive, and serves the primary purpose to deny as much short-range aggression onto your Reinhardt as possible by Hog's scrap gun. This is also more of a counter pick than anything else, considering that Zarya is a more efficient pick in case your team lacks shield break or pick potential Hog Sigma. This duo will definitely be a sleeper in ladder due to Sigma having Hog's pick potential, but added defensive utility as well. If your Sigma plays overtly aggressive however, you may want to either play more passive to deter any aggression, or to swap to another hero such as REINHARDT or ORISA. Hog Diva. This duo provides some damage mitigation and coverage of the low ground and high ground. However, both these characters are prone to taking unnecessary damage, alongside Sigma being the better pick simply because he has more types of utility, blurring the lines of main tank and off tank. Hog Zarya. Whilst this isn't the worst synergy for Hog, it may be for Zarya. This duo offers a lack of cover, bubbles that easily burst as a result of that, and whilst you can combo whole Hog with Grav, Zarya may just be too fragile of an off tank to allow you to play an aggressive, flanking style of Hog. Well, that's it for the guide.
Okay, so I'm gonna give this one. I'll give this one a beefed because I agree with 95% of what's been said.
Sometimes my genius is... it's almost frightening.
Zarya's primary fire, the Beamy Blast, is a particle cannon that deals between 95 and 170 damage per second depending on energy. The beam takes up 20 rounds per second, with a total ammo capacity of 100. Zarya can also lob explosive charges, dealing between 47 and 95 damage, alongside a speed of 25 meters per second, consuming 20 ammo a shot. I'll start off interweaving tech and usage. Firstly, weave in your beam in between your right clicks. The only downside to this is that you will launch 4 bombs instead of 5. However, this is the most efficient way to get the most value out of your 100 ammo. You can also use your right click below 20 ammo. Secondly, when focusing a single target, you want to start and end off with your secondary fire, and in between, you want to use your beam.
A target that's being healed, burst damage becomes even more effective on top of that. Because if you think about the point in a person's health bar in which it applied, if you're kind of shooting person with a damage over time that did 1 tick of damage but a fuck ton of ticks per second, then the healing will start at 199 HP. But if you do a burst damage like a discorded body shot or something, the healer can only start healing when the person is at like 50 HP.
Thirdly, learn to rocket jump. This is done by simply right-clicking the ground as soon as you jump. This can be used for mobility as you see on the screen right now, or to gain high ground as Yeetle does here.
Fine, 6 still behind. What else high ground behind the 6 shield? Oh my god, Zarya, what the
my high ground. You can take this to the next level by firing one of your charges in the air. Then you do the normal rocket jump when both charges collide to obtain high ground such as Nepal Shrine. Fourthly, your right click has the same projectile arc as Grav, hence you want to shoot your right click just before Grav to know where it will land. For the rest of the small mechanics, I recommend watching this 3-year-old video which has some small interesting interactions. For example, right-clicking a Diva mech as soon as it breaks to land some burst damage on the mini Diva. In terms of direct usage, you want to use your right clicks after a one-team fight at the enemy spawn for 4 main reasons as Curry Shot describes here.
Push up when they're spawning, and then they'll kite their way back to spawn, right? So that way you can get a bubble rotation off, and you can keep high energy, and then you can go ahead and farm grab.
Another reason to use right-click when in a 1 versus 1 scenario is to utilize the knockback.
The right-click slightly boops your enemy, making their strafe easier to predict, and their first shot slightly harder to hit. If you really catch an enemy off guard, you can throw in a melee right after the initial right click for maximum DPS.
You also want to beam shields as due to the higher damage per second. However, when the shield is about to break, use your right click as Yeetle describes here yet again.
Right click if it's about to break, that way if a teammate breaks it, you'll get the splash damage, and if they don't, it'll burst down faster.
Other than that, try and use your beam as much as possible as it's much easier to land and track, whilst also dishing out over twice the damage per second compared to your secondary fire. Zarya's first ability, the bubble, makes Zarya emit a personal particle barrier that redirects the energy from those attacks to make her weapon more powerful. The barrier has 200 health, and gains 1% energy per 5 damage blocked, up to 40% energy. The area of effect is 1.5 meters, alongside a duration of 2 seconds, and a cooldown of 10 seconds. It is also important to note that the percentage of energy gained represents how much more damage she does. For instance, if her energy is at 25%, she will do 25% more damage, and that energy decays at 1.6% per second. There isn't much tech other than being able to rocket jump without taking any damage, as you can see Yeetle doing in the background. Firstly, similar to what Curry Shot said, you want to be bubbling 10 seconds before the next fight starts in order to maintain energy whilst also being able to readily use your bubble when the team fight actually begins. In higher ranks, you want to request some resources such as speed boost in order to prevent being run over when attempting to retain energy after a one-team fight. Secondly, you can use your self-bubble to cleanse status and damage over time effects such as Ana's Nade, Zen's Discord, or Ash's Dynamite. Thirdly, if your Reinhardt is getting pressured hard, you can use your self-bubble to absorb some of the incoming damage. However, this may put you at danger, and I only recommend this if you, as a 6-man team, are kiting away with speed boost. Lastly, if you are at the point where one bubble will put you at maximum energy, you do not want to use both your bubbles at the same time, as Jayne further elaborates here.
And you used both your bubbles. So you were at 60 energy, right? The point where a single bubble will put you to basically max. And you used both your bubbles at the same time as well. So if you are trying to like maintain 100, instead of using both your bubbles to get to 100, and then during that entire cooldown period, your energy is just decaying, you don't want to use both your cooldowns at the same time unless it has really hit the fan, because then you're going to have to stabilize, wait for another set of cooldowns before you and your main tank can be aggressive.
Building on this point, you want to save your bubble in order to save your life at high energy. For example, against a Sigma with Flux, or a Reinhardt being pinned. Zarya's second ability, Bubble V2, is the exact same as her first ability, but can only be applied to teammates, and has a slightly shorter cooldown. This is the more complex ability to cover. The most obvious use is to bubble for energy, which is done with your first set of bubbles or at the end of a one-team fight as mentioned prior. The next use is to bubbling when your Reinhardt engages in order to take or retain map control, as Mineral describes here.
Here, Toronto drops from the high ground, stops for a moment, doesn't fully close the distance while also bubbling first. No advantages gained here. The Defiant are so tentative that they don't even force out Carpe's target bubble, and Yakbung only gets one swing in and 6% ult charge. The Fusion's distance management is good here, and they can easily all in with their own bubbles, gaining a ton of space, converting a kill on Zarya and forcing out 2 support ults.
You don't want to be bubbling too early, and you want to bubble exactly when your Reinhardt starts the swing animation. Thirdly, building on this idea, you want to ideally bubble second on high energy as Jayne further explains here.
So if you bubble first, your Reinhardt will push in, and then their Reinhardt will get bubbled and it'll push out. So the motion looks like that. But in the other way, if you allow them to bubble first, and you force their Reinhardt to attack you, then when you bubble here and your Reinhardt pushes back, you can chase farther without overextending. Bait them in, let them use projected first, then counter push with your own projected, especially if you're at high energy.
You want to be on high energy as you will be able to make use of the space that your Reinhardt creates. Fourthly, you want to ideally save at least your projected bubble for ultimates such as Grav, to then project them onto your squishy teammates.
So as a rule of thumb, if your 200 HP targets get caught in the Grav and they're exposed, they should be priority targets. The Reinhardt comes in and he's gonna always look for a pin on Lucio or on Brig so that he gets the one shot through your transfer. Especially like you say in this situation because he's exposed to the entirety of their team.
Fifthly, you can use your projected bubble on teammates who need peeling, such as your Zen. However, a pick such as D.Va may be better, and it's not necessarily your job to peel as he should have good positioning, and your other support can peel whilst you pressure the front line. Peeling and landing clutch bubbles as a whole however are situational. For the 6th tip, you can step inside of a teammate's projected bubble if yours is on cooldown. This is most useful when a stationary teammate, such as a Bastion, is about to experience high amounts of burst damage. For instance, against a D.Va bomb, or High Noon. For the penultimate piece of information, bubbles that are considered clutch and bubbles that gain 40 energy are essentially the same in most scenarios. This is the main reason why Zarya pairs well with Doom, as her bubbles gain exponential levels of value, alongside a Mercy in her Resurrect animation. Finally, I'll put some typical callouts you need to make as Zarya in order to maximize her bubble value. These are incredibly important the higher you climb, hence I'd pause the video to integrate them into your mind. Zarya's ultimate, the Black Hole, makes Zarya launch a gravity bomb dealing 22 damage, holding all enemies within its 6-meter radius, lasting 4 seconds, alongside a projectile speed of 25 meters per second. Apart from the tech mentioned prior with your right click having the same speed and arc as your Grav, you can perform a reload animation cancelled by firing Grav as soon as your ammo has been refilled to 100 in the bottom right. Speaking of ammo, you should always reload before you Grav, as you have roughly 5 seconds of uptime with a full clip, lasting slightly longer than the Grav itself. For the 2nd tip, you need to keep track of the opposing enemy cooldowns that can prevent follow-up from your Grav, the key ones being Zarya's bubble, but also Orisa's Fortify, Hog's Breather and Reinhardt's Shield. This also applies to Sigma's Flux, but since some significant damage is guaranteed, this is more important with Grav. Thirdly, solo Grav against key targets, such as a Mercy using her Resurrect, or Nano Blade. However, Grav the ground as he can deflect your Grav. Fourthly, against a D.Va, wait for her to use Matrix, then you can freely use Grav. If you are impatient, use grav on corners and on payload. There is an extra layer of mind games in the higher ranks, such as a diva flicking her mouse to catch grav, which I advise you to be cautious of. For the 5th tip, you typically want to use your right click, then melee afterwards, as it does the most area of effect damage. However, if you grab a single target, I recommend you use your beam due to the much higher damage you do per second, and since there is so much area of effect healing in the game, focusing down a single target may be more beneficial. Previous tips about which mode to use on your weapon still apply. For the penultimate tip, you can counter grav against a combo such as Grav Diva Bomb. SVB explains this in response to my GOAT's guide, which I advise you to pause and read in this comment here. But essentially, your grav prevents the Reinhardt from using his pin, which is needed to allow the bomb to land, and you still end up with extra time in which your enemies are stationary. For the final tip, I'll show Jayne explaining when to grav on defense as ZARYA. Note that for attack, the opposite applies.
Meters on the payload, time on the clock, and ult charge. Those are the 3 main resources that win fights. So if you grav dragon right off the bat, you got very, very little time off the clock. If you kill all 6 of them with grav dragon, then you don't get any reward in ult charge. So it's definitely not number 1. Is it 2 or is it 3? So do you use it as soon as you engage, or do you use it as late as possible? Now, there's a couple different thoughts here. If you're actually tracking ultimates and the opponent has their own combo, then you want to grav before they can ult you. Because if they dismantle your win condition with ultimates, then you're fucked and your ability to actually grav dragon doesn't work anymore. But in general, if you are in a position of advantage, for example, if you're on control and you own the point, the answer is going to be wanting to fight as late as possible to make sure that you get most value out of your 1 team fights.
Moving on to positioning, this is typically an area overlooked by many guides. However, this is much more nuanced beyond Grandmaster. Starting off with the simple tips, you should mostly be positioned where you can return to cover within a maximum of 3 seconds. Exceptions to this would be going on a full flank to assassinate a target, and this is mainly aimed to prevent you from taking too wide of an angle to farm energy. Secondly, you should be playing out of range or sight from the enemy shatter or even grav in some cases in order to be able to use your bubbles effectively or immediately. Thirdly, if your main tank is comfortable on the frontline battle, you can take off angles away from the main fight to frag the enemy damaged heroes. When doing this, you want to use your projected bubble on the frontline team fight, as you won't be on the front line, whilst retaining your own personal bubble to take on the duel and block stuns. A great example of this would be on Rialto first point attack, on the left side around the first corner. Lastly, if you are ahead in bubble rotations, you want to wait until the enemy team get in range to then go all in, as Mineral elaborates on here.
Do you like your positioning in your self bubble here? Maybe it's better to wait till they drop so that you can all in them, because you're gonna get energy anyway. You guys have a little bit of an energy advantage. Let's be aggressive as soon as they drop. If within the next 10 seconds one of them drops, you guys are gonna push in. You will still get 100 because you have 2 bubbles, they have 1. The engagement should be a little cleaner because you don't really have to catch up on energy.
As usual, ending off with tank synergies. ZARYA Reinhardt. This is the most classic combo in which you can gain energy from you taking damage whilst Reinhardt swings, whilst also cycling ultimates, as your Reinhardt can swing and grav. The only weakness is a lack of off-angle coverage alongside close to no peel for your backline, in which you might want to consider going Diva. ZARYA Diva. This combo has extremely high utility. However, there are no stuns, and it may be harder to gain value from your bubble compared to the other options. Point control and objective pressure may also be harder to keep or apply due to lack of main tank. However, you can pull off the Grav Diva Bomb in the majority of ranks successfully. ZARYA Hog. This is the most chaotic duo ZARYA has. There is no direct synergy between ZARYA and Hog. However, he may feed you more energy than other options such as ORISA or Diva. Pushing through chokes will also be difficult alongside controlling the map, similar with the other off-tank choices. I recommend this duo if you refuse to swap off ZARYA, and you need some stun in your team to counter a Doom or a Reaper. ZARYA Winston. This is definitely an underrated combo, as your Winston is guaranteed to take damage during a dive. Make sure to push up when he creates space to be able to retain it over time. Both of your weapons are also cleave beam damage, meaning that this is on paper a good duo against Diva ZARYA Bull. This is an upgraded version of the previous duo, as Bull has much more survivability than Winston, and can tank many of the stuns for ZARYA. However, you should be playing passive, applying objective pressure, farming energy when your Bull engages, and well within cover to bait the enemy team in overextending, just like the Hunters did in their reverse sweep. ZARYA ORISA. This duo may also be the weakest in contention with HOG, as both characters have different play styles, with ORISA being defensive, and you being aggressive. Hence it may be hard to gain and retain energy. However, due to ORISA's point presence, you can take off angles to anyone contesting your ORISA, on top of how powerful both your ultimates are. ZARYA Sigma. This duo is best suited against bunker style comps such as ORISA HOG, although do not run Sigma ZARYA against dive. While both characters can dish out a high level of damage, alongside two very powerful ultimates, there is no defensive capability, with a limited amount of cover, no access to high ground, and few stuns. Well, that's it for the guide.
Big boy without big broom. Big boy how I come through. Big boy without brand new cause I'm killing it.